Chapter 408. Pang Xiao looked at the crowd sternly. What? Is there really going to be a change? Ahem. Shu Weiji stood up with a smile and smiled at Pang Xiao comfortingly. Wang Yi, don't be nervous. Your father-in-law, old Taishan, is an intelligent person. Miss Qin is even more intelligent. No matter what happens in the Qin's mansion, Minister Qin and Miss Qin can solve it perfectly. As for the Wang's mansion, with Wang Yi in charge, any problem can be solved easily. Yes, yes. All the strategists nodded in unison. Pang Xiao's heartstrings relaxed slightly after hearing his comforting words. His tense shoulders also loosened. What you said makes sense. Pang Xiao nodded seriously. All the strategists couldn't help but find it interesting. Wang Yi, who was usually extremely intelligent and shrewd, actually had such a childish side. He looked like a young man. But on second thought, Wang Yi had no experience in relationships. In terms of relationships, he was really a young man. Everyone had been young before, and they all knew what it felt like to be moved by a woman. Regardless of the outcome of their relationship, whether they could be together with the woman they loved, they could still understand this feeling of anticipation, nervousness, and worry about gains and losses. Everyone couldn't help but sigh with emotion. It was so good to be young. Xie Yu stood up and said with a kind smile, Wang Yi, in my opinion, you really don't have to worry. 2 days ago, you mentioned the matter of old Master Ji Yu. Minister Qin was still locked up in the palace, and he was afraid that Miss Qin couldn't solve it. But you see, no matter how much you prepared, it was useless. Miss Qin solved the problem single-handedly. Yes. Miss Qin is really the most intelligent woman I've ever seen in my life. Everyone echoed. Pang Xiao nodded seriously. You're right. When they saw Pang Xiao's reaction, everyone suddenly felt that they had found a new way to please Wang Yi. Some of the strategists who usually wanted to get close to Wang Yi and become core members of his staff started praising Qin Yining. They had seen Qin Yining before and knew how smart she was. Naturally, their praises were well-founded. Pang Xiao listened attentively and felt comfortable all over. It was as comfortable as soaking in a hot spring. He couldn't help but nod repeatedly, and his tense face also relaxed a lot. Xie Yu and Shu Weiji looked at each other. Both of their faces were tense. If not for this, they would have laughed out loud. In their hearts, Wang Yi had always been an extremely intelligent person. Now that they could see such a down-to-earth side of him, they were already laughing in their hearts. Pang Xiao said, there are a few things we need to pay attention to now. First, we need to prevent people from causing trouble before the wedding. Second, we need to prevent people from causing trouble at the wedding. Third, the list of betrothal gifts has already been given. We need to choose an auspicious day to send it to the right person. Fourth, how should we do it on the day of the makeup ceremony? Fifth, and this is also the most important point. At this point, Pang Xiao took a deep breath. Everyone's expressions also became serious. Pang Xiao said, the most important thing is that this king's future father-in-law is extremely talented and knowledgeable. Naturally, there is no lack of people around him who are equally intelligent. I'm just afraid that on the day of the wedding, their relatives will block the door and ask tricky questions. What should we do then? Everyone, Wang Yi, you're not even afraid of fighting a bloody battle between two armies, but you're actually afraid of a few questions that block the door? The strategists felt that they still didn't know Wang Yi well enough. Ahem. Xie Yu cleared her throat and tried to hold back her laughter. Wang Yi, you don't need to worry about people causing trouble before the wedding. Firstly, the Lu family's matter has attracted some people's attention. Secondly, your wedding is bestowed by your majesty. The imperial edict is still enshrined in the ancestral hall. Who would have the guts to cause trouble? As for those brainless people who want to cause trouble, most of them are just clowns. There's nothing to be afraid of. Wang Yi, don't worry. Pang Xiao nodded slowly. Shu Weiji also said, you don't need to worry too much about people causing trouble at the wedding. I think, with your majesty's brotherly love for Wang Yi, he will definitely arrange the wedding properly. Who knows, maybe your majesty will even bring the empress to attend the ceremony. With your majesty around, we naturally don't need to worry. Even if your majesty doesn't come, Wang Yi still has Jinghu Wei around. Jinghu Wei is a soldier of our residence. He doesn't need the tiger seal to mobilize these elites. That's right. Xie Yu added, Wang Yi can also contact Prince Consort Ji. Prince Consort Ji is now in charge of the tiger army. He also has close to 100 soldiers in his residence. He can also borrow them to maintain order. Xu Weiji and Xie Yu didn't make their words too clear, but Pang Xiao already understood what they meant. Although Ji Ziyu was the commander-in-chief of the tiger army, he was confident that he had a good reputation in the tiger army. Ji Ziyu's soldiers were drawn from the tiger army. Borrowing these people was no different from mobilizing his own subordinates. Okay. Pang Xiao nodded and said with satisfaction, let's not talk about other things. The soldiers we train ourselves are first class in martial arts. It's not like we're going to have a gang fight. What's the point of looking at martial arts? Wang Yi was really overjoyed that he was going to get married. Xie Yu said with amusement, the most important thing is that you have to choose some good-looking people. Wang Yi, think about it. The young people are wearing military uniforms. They're neat and majestic. How stylish. Yes, yes. Pang Xiao nodded repeatedly. It's settled. This king will go back and discuss with Ji Lan. As for the betrothal gifts, Xu Weiji said, Old Madam and Old Master have already prepared the betrothal gifts. Because they were worried that they would overstep the boundaries, they prepared 208 betrothal gifts, which are all really good things. It's not convenient for Wang Yi to show up when the betrothal gifts are sent. Old Master will arrange for the appropriate people to go. That's good. Pang Xiao nodded, but felt that it was not enough. Give this king 2 more carts of gold. I want small yellow crocus. They should be neatly stacked. 210 carts is just enough to make it a round number. Everyone was stunned. 2 carts of small yellow crocus. How much gold would that be? Everyone could already imagine how many people would be blinded by the small yellow crocus shining in the sun. Wang Yi, this gold is too eye-catching. What if people talk about it? Besides, Your Majesty is short of money now. Pang Xiao waved his hand indifferently. If they want it, they can come and snatch it. This king will only marry once in his life. The good girl that he raised for so many years is given to me. My betrothal gifts are too little. Sister Yi is also wronged. Besides, my father-in-law, old Tai Shan, is not an ordinary minister. He is an existence that can change the world with a flip of the hand. Adding 2 more carts of small yellow crocus is not much. Xie Yu was speechless. But thinking about it carefully, it made sense. Chapter 409. This was because the remaining elders of Biji had all surrendered. It could be said that they were not loyal to their king or their country, but rather opportunists who knew how to adapt to the current situation. Even if these people did not engage in excessive taxation, they still had a large amount of wealth in their hands. In comparison, Wang Yi was considered poor. Your Majesty naturally understood this situation. If they wanted money, everyone had to fork out. It was not only Pang Xiao who had to fork out the money. Thinking up to this point, everyone felt relieved. After discussing a few issues, Pang Xiao felt much more at ease. He thought for a while and said, You are all intelligent people, and there are many of you who have outstanding literary talent. Help this king write a make-up hastening poem. You must write it well. Also, think carefully about the problem of blocking the door. Write a list for this king, and this king will memorize it later. Xu Weiji and Xie Yu stood up and bowed with everyone else. Yes. After Pang Xiao gave the strategists their homework, he went out. The strategists looked at each other and could not help but laugh. A few of them who were talented in literary talent went to study the make-up hastening poem together. A few smart ones began to list the answers to some questions based on the weddings they had attended so that Pang Xiao could revise before the exam. Xu Weiji went to the inner residence to discuss with Yaro Chungu and Madame Ma about adding 2 more carriages of small yellow crocus. Pang Xiao went out and ordered someone to prepare a horse. Then, he went out of the city to walk the horse alone. Huzi followed Pang Xiao's instructions and quietly went to the prince consort's residence to ask Ji Zhayu to meet him. When Ji Zhayu arrived at the invitation, he saw Pang Xiao. He was clad in a black brocade robe. A jade belt was tied around his waist, and a purple golden crown was on his head. He was riding his warhorse called Black Cloud. Its entire body was jet black and shiny. It was galloping along the moat. Dark Cloud's body was oily black, and it shone under the sunlight. The man on the horse seemed to have merged with it. Leaning on the horse's back, the man and the horse rushed past like lightning, disappearing into the dark green shadows of the trees. Ji Zhayu did not ride his fiery red warhorse today. Instead, he rode the snow-white warhorse that he had captured from Qin Yining. It was a gift from Pang Xiao to Qin Yining. Its coat was silver-white, and its name was White Cloud. Ever since he started following Ji Zhayu, he had been taking care of White Cloud. White Cloud and Ji Zhayu were now very close. Ji Zhayu was wearing a red t-shirt. His hair was tied up high and fluttering in the wind. His posture was straight, his face was peerless, and his expression was cold. The gorgeous red clothes on his body did not make him look feminine at all. It only made people feel that he was as cold as ice and unapproachable. Pang Xiao ran one round beside the willow embankment of the moat, and not long after, he galloped back on his horse. When he saw Ji Zhayu from afar, he grinned and waved the horsewhip in his hand. "Ah Lan, do you want to run one round?" Ji Zhayu smiled slightly, nodded, and waved the horsewhip. "Go." White Cloud transformed into a silver ray of light and rushed forward. Pang Xiao also urged Dark Cloud, and the two Fergana horses galloped quickly. The two Daeju generals on the horses' backs whipped their horses, and they both felt carefree. They were in the imperial court, and they had no choice. What they lacked was this kind of indulgence and pleasure. The two of them ran a few rounds, and then slowly rode along the small path, one in front of the other, into the distance. Ji Zhayu asked, "Jishi, why are you looking for me?" "I have something to ask for your help." Pang Xiao smiled and said, "I'm afraid that someone will cause trouble for my wedding next month, so I want to borrow your government soldiers to help me suppress the situation." Ji Zhayu raised his eyes in surprise when he heard this. He met Pang Xiao's smiling eyes and said with a smile, "I'll personally bring people over at that time." Pang Xiao didn't expect Ji Zhayu to agree so easily. He said with some worry, "Your Majesty will definitely think too much at that time." "It's okay. If your Majesty asks, I'll say that I'm worried that your government soldiers will cause trouble, so I'll bring the soldiers to deter them," Ji Zhayu said without thinking. Pang Xiao was moved when he heard this. He stretched out his arm and patted Ji Zhayu's shoulder. "Good brother, thank you very much." Ji Zhayu looked at the big hand on his shoulder and then said with a smile, "Master Guan saw it clearly when I kowtowed to the ground. We were brothers at that time, so we'll be brothers for life." Pang Xiao looked at Ji Zhayu's bright smile, and his smile widened. "You're indeed my brother. I'll rush the makeup on the 10th day of the new year. You must accompany me." Ji Zhayu nodded and said with a gentle smile, "Of course. I also want to see what kind of family raised what kind of daughter to charm your heart." Speaking of this, Ji Zhayu said with some disappointment, "Jishi, have you really accepted this marriage and let go of your hatred?" Back then, in the imperial court, Qin Huayuan made a scene and forced your Majesty to issue an imperial edict. Ji Zhayu went back and was angry for several days. Minister Qin is too cunning. He forced your Majesty to issue an imperial edict. Either he punished you so that you wouldn't have the ability to take revenge, or he tried to rope you in and make you his son-in-law so that you wouldn't be able to take revenge. This person is unfathomable. I'm really worried that you'll be schemed against. Ji Zhayu could see that Pang Xiao liked Qin Yining. So there was one thing he didn't say. He was really worried that Qin Yining was Qin Huayuan's honey trap to Pang Xiao. But now, this kind of worry seemed so unnecessary. Because looking at Pang Xiao's cheerful appearance, he had obviously let go of his hatred for his father and was willing to fall into the trap. Now that things had come to this, what else could he do? The imperial edict had been issued, and he had fallen into the honey trap, but Pang Xiao was still so happy. He was so happy that it was as if he was a different person. They had been friends since they were young. After so many years, this was the first time Ji Ziyu saw Pang Xiao let go of his hatred and smile so easily. Your marriage isn't a small matter. Now that I'm leading the troops you used to lead, although the Taytan is in internal strife and has no time to invade the south, if there's another war, I think your majesty will very likely let you lead the Dragon Legion. I'm your majesty's brother-in-law now. He trusts me and naturally wants me to stay in the capital to protect him. You're more likely to be sent out. You're right. Pang Xiao heard Ji Ziyu's analysis and nodded seriously. I also guessed that your majesty would have this arrangement. Your majesty also thought of a good idea to swap you and me. Ji Ziyu said, so your marriage will definitely be noticed by the Taytan. Look at you now, you're so happy that it's as if you've changed into a different person. It can be seen that when you get married, you might let down your guard. The Taytan people are afraid of me, and even more afraid of you, who is famous for your fighting prowess. They are very cunning, and they might do something. When the time comes, I'll bring the prefecture soldiers, and we can be on guard. Chapter 4:10. When Ji Ziyu heard this, he lowered his eyes and smiled. Actually, there's nothing wrong with letting go of your hatred. You and your family are not fated to be together. Your father doesn't even know that you exist in this world. Now that you can let go of your hatred, you have less burden and pressure. What's wrong with living a carefree life in the future? You don't have to accept those stubborn reasons. As long as you can be happy. Pang Xiao was moved by Ji Ziyu's words. Only those who truly cared about him would care about his emotions and whether he was happy or not. All this time, he and Ji Ziyu had a tacit understanding of each other, making use of each other and guarding against each other. However, Pang Xiao knew that even so, it was only a means to protect themselves. They had never taken the initiative to hurt each other. It was extremely rare to be able to maintain this friendship in such a chaotic situation in the imperial court. Lan, thank you. Pang Xiao smiled at Ji Ziyu. His smile was filled with pure joy. Ji Ziyu looked at Pang Xiao's handsome face and could not help but smile. There's no need to be so polite between brothers. Pang Xiao smiled again when he heard this. The two of them rode their horses forward slowly. Pang Xiao laughed and said, if His Majesty finds out about our current relationship, I wonder how angry he will be. Ji Ziyu also smiled, there's nothing we can do about it. Life has to go on. We can talk about brotherhood with your Majesty, but we have to stay alive. Moreover, you have a family to feed now. It's not good for you to throw caution to the wind and completely disregard your family's elders and daughter-in-law. Pang Xiao nodded when he heard this. Actually, the three of us were sworn brothers back then. If His Majesty hadn't been so suspicious and scheming against me, I wouldn't have minded risking my life for my brothers. Unfortunately, things don't go as I wish. Ji Ziyu also nodded with some regret, then smiled and said, you don't have to be so sad. Feelings between people are mutual. He schemed against us, so we have to guard against him. But it's different between you and me. Although we sometimes have some tacit understanding, I'm still willing to risk my life for you. Pang Xiao knew how cold Ji Ziyu was. But now, Ji Ziyu was able to say it so calmly. Pang Xiao could only see sincerity in his eyes, without the slightest falsehood or calculation. Me too, Pang Xiao said from the bottom of his heart. When Ji Ziyu heard this, he looked at Pang Xiao and couldn't help but laugh heartily. That's enough. Fortunately, the two of us were able to maintain our original intentions. Pang Xiao also felt quite fortunate. The two of them urged their horses to gallop around the forest. After saying goodbye, they went back to the city through different city gates. After Ji Ziyu entered the city, he didn't immediately return to the prince consort's residence. Instead, he circled around and arrived outside the Qin Manor. He held White Cloud and stood in a secluded alley diagonally opposite the Qin Manor. Only half of his body was exposed, and the other half was blocked by a thick tree trunk. He expressionlessly looked at the bustling family Qin on the other side. For Qin Yining's marriage, the family Qin was also bustling with preparations. There were many people moving in front of the manor, and it was very lively. Ji Ziyu didn't know why he was standing here. At this time, his heart was empty, and he silently looked at the family Qin people coming and going in front of the door. When he returned to the city, for a moment, he really wanted to ask if Qin Yining's feelings for Pang Xiao were serious, or if he was just afraid that Pang Xiao would take revenge and purposely seduced her. But now, he felt that his thoughts were unreasonable. Firstly, he didn't have this position. Secondly, Your Majesty decreed this marriage, so this marriage was already set in stone. To put it bluntly, as long as the two of them were still breathing, no matter what happened, they would still have to get married. Since things had already come to this, what was the use of saying more? Moreover, Pang Xiao liked Qin Yining so much. Even if Qin Yining was a bit arrogant and willful, perhaps Pang Xiao would still find it interesting. Ji Ziyu lowered his eyes for a moment and laughed self-mockingly. He took the reins and wanted to leave. Unexpectedly, at this time, he suddenly saw a carriage turn the corner and slowly stop in front of the Qin manor. A familiar and graceful figure got off the carriage with the help of a servant girl and was about to head into the manor. White Cloud, who was beside Ji Ziyu, seemed to recognize the figure. It impatiently kicked its horse's hooves and gave a long neigh. Ji Ziyu stroked White Cloud's mane to appease it. Unexpectedly, Qin Yining seemed to have sensed something and looked in his direction. The two of them looked at each other. Qin Yining was a bit surprised. She had just gone to Master Zhong's manor to discuss opening an inn in the capital. She had also promised Master Zhong that he would come to the wedding banquet. Unexpectedly, she had just returned when she heard the neigh of a horse. Qin Yining vaguely felt that it was familiar. She turned around and saw the red-clothed youth who was half hidden behind a big tree. However, his presence didn't weaken at all. Ji Ziyu was really too handsome. He was so handsome that his presence was so strong that it was impossible to ignore him. Qin Yining looked around. She wasn't sure if Your Majesty's people were watching them. She also wasn't sure if Ji Ziyu knew that the Qin family might be under surveillance. However, if there really was surveillance, the spies would have seen Ji Ziyu as soon as he came. If she didn't take the initiative to go over and talk, it would seem that there was something fishy going on. Thinking of this, Qin Yining brought Ji Yun around the carriage and walked towards Ji Ziyu. Ji Ziyu had already returned to his cold and frosty appearance. He looked expressionlessly at Qin Yining, who was gradually walking towards him. He had to admit that Qin Yining had the capital to move Pang Xiao's heart. She had the capital to cause the downfall of a country. Moreover, although she was bright and beautiful, she didn't make people feel that she was vulgar. She also didn't have the fawning face of many women. Instead, there was wisdom between her brows. One look and one could tell that she was a knowledgeable person. Prince Consort Ji. Why are you here? Why don't you come in and have a seat? Qin Yining approached and bowed with a smile. Ji Ziyu said coldly, I'm just passing by. I saw that your family was preparing something lively, so I came to take a look. Qin Yining smiled and said, Thank you for your concern, Prince Consort Ji. I'm not concerned. I'm just passing by. Ji Ziyu's tone was cold and stiff. Qin Yining felt a little awkward when she heard this. She smiled awkwardly. She could tell that Ji Ziyu had always hated her. She didn't know what she had done to provoke him. Could it be that he still hated her for being the daughter of Pang Xiao's father's murderer? Qin Yining coughed and said, All right then. Since Prince Consort Ji has other matters to attend to, I won't force you to come. Prince Consort Ji will definitely invite you to the wedding banquet another day. Ji Ziyu looked at her expressionlessly and didn't react. Qin Yining felt that she might have really offended Ji Ziyu. Otherwise, how could a godlike figure who could lead troops into battle be so inarticulate? To put it bluntly, it was just that he treated people coldly and disliked her. Qin Yining didn't want to continue asking for a snub, so she turned around to return to the residence. However, she heard Ji Ziyu ask, Miss Qin, do you truly like Pang Zhishi? Will you treat him with sincerity? If it involves the love and hatred between the two families, will you be able to put Pang Zhishi first and everything else second? Qin Yining was stunned when she heard this. She abruptly looked up at Ji Ziyu. Chapter 4:11. Qin Yining was very surprised. Actually, she still had some doubts about Ji Ziyu. She didn't know what the relationship between Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu was. She just felt that it was impossible to be completely untainted in the imperial court. Therefore, Ji Zhayu and Pang Xiao used each other and tested each other. Qin Yining didn't know how much of it was true. Ji Zhayu was originally a cold and arrogant person. He didn't easily express his thoughts. She had to guess what he was thinking. In addition, the assassination attempt on her way to Daeju gave Qin Yining some preconceived notions about Ji Zhayu. She knew that he was a ruthless person. Therefore, Qin Yining was very surprised that Ji Zhayu personally came to the family Qin to ask her this question before her wedding with Pang Xiao. Was he sincere, or was he testing her? Qin Yining's beautiful eyes met Ji Zhayu's beautiful peach blossom eyes. She only saw sincerity in his eyes. She didn't see any scheming. At this moment, Qin Yining was almost certain that Ji Zhayu's mood when he asked these questions wasn't scheming, but deep concern. Perhaps this was the friendship between men. It was just like Bing Tang. If they wanted to get married, she would choose her partner carefully. She was afraid that they would meet someone cruel and unscrupulous. She was afraid that they wouldn't have a good life. Ji Zhayu was probably also afraid that Pang Xiao wouldn't have a good life after getting married, right? It seemed that even though Ji Zhayu used Pang Xiao in the past, their brotherly relationship was serious. Qin Yining was also kind to people who were kind to Pang Xiao. She put away her grudges and wariness and said with a smile, "Women are different from men. Men can have 3 wives and 4 concubines, but women have to be faithful to one. No matter how many grudges we had in the past, from the day Your Majesty decreed our marriage, my life has been tied to Wang Yi's. If he lives, I will live. If anything happens to him, I won't live either. This is not only because of the love and hatred between the two families, but also because we are now a family and can only be a family. I'm good to him and sincerely support him. That's for the sake of our future. It's not just for Wang Yi, and it's not just for me. My future is tied to him. I can only be stable if he is stable. His future is my future. Prince Consort Ji is a smart person. I believe you should already understand what I've said." Qin Yining couldn't directly tell Ji Zhayu that she and Pang Xiao loved each other to death. Your Majesty's decree of marriage was exactly what she wanted. Because even if she trusted Ji Zhayu, she didn't know if Your Majesty's spies would know what she said. But she had already expressed her intentions so clearly. She and Pang Xiao had a future together. How could she hurt him? Ji Zhayu looked at Qin Yining. A faint smile slowly appeared on his handsome face, which was usually expressionless to outsiders. The smile was very faint, and the corners of his lips were slightly curved. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't have noticed that he was smiling just now. "I understand. I hope you remember what you said today." In Qin Yining's ears, this sentence was both a request and a threat. But she wasn't angry at all. Because she knew that Ji Zhayu was doing this for Pang Xiao. Qin Yining nodded solemnly. "Okay." As the two of them spoke, White Cloud came over and rubbed its head against Qin Yining's cheek. Ji Zhayu was a little surprised. He looked at White Cloud with a complicated expression and used his hand to stroke its mane. "This is the horse he gave you. I'll return it to you. Remember to pass the reins to Qin Yining." Qin Yining smiled and shook his head. He took a step back and said, "It's a good horse. A horse's nature is to have a vast world for it to run in. Although I like it, it can only stay in the stable if it stays by my side. Even if I give it good food and take care of it, it still won't be happy. It might even erase its nature. It's more suitable for it to stay with you." Ji Zhayu slowly tightened his grip on the reins. His heart skipped a beat, and many complicated emotions flashed through his mind. But when he saw Qin Yining's smiling face, he felt relieved. Perhaps Pang Zhishi was right. "You're a good girl." Qin Yining had already mentally prepared himself for Ji Zhayu to treat her coldly, but she didn't expect him to say this. Qin Yining was very satisfied to receive the affirmation of Pang Xiao's good friend. "Thank you. You're also a good brother." Ji Zhayu was stunned. Then, he smiled and shook his head. He muttered, "Good brother?" Then, he lightly leaped onto White Cloud and shook the reins. "Let's go." As soon as he finished speaking, he urged White Cloud to leave the family Qin. Qin Yining looked at his back. After a while, he smiled slightly and turned to return to the residence. The wedding preparations were in full swing. Because Your Majesty issued the edict in a hurry, both sides were a little flustered. Fortunately, they didn't lack manpower, and they also didn't lack friends who wanted to curry favor with them. In the blink of an eye, it was already the 10th of May. Everything had been taken care of. Early in the morning, Pang Xiao had already made the Jinghu Wei anxious. The 18 people she chose were the youngest, most handsome, and most outstanding among the Jinghu Wei. In fact, because they were beautiful and could personally accompany Wang Yi to deliver the betrothal gifts, these 18 people were very proud. This made the other Jinghu Wei brothers very jealous. Dai Fu, don't be anxious. You must be polite to your in-laws, do you hear me? Retract that aura of yours. You're someone who has killed enemies on the battlefield. If your hands are stained with blood, your aura will be heavy. Don't let the in-laws think that you're snatching the bride, do you understand? Madame Ma nagged as she helped Pang Xiao straighten the lapels of his light purple robe. I understand, grandmother. Don't worry. Don't worry. How can I not worry? Look at what kind of people you've gathered outside. Those who know you're going to rush the makeup, but those who don't know will think that you're going to fight with the in-laws. Madame Ma glanced at the open carved window and the 18 men standing in the courtyard in their military uniforms. She felt rather vexed. Let me tell you, don't mess it up, do you understand? If you dare mess it up, I'll beat you to death with my shoe. Mother, all right. You should let Dai Fu go first. Don't delay the auspicious time. Didn't Dai Fu say that he invited Prince Consort Ji? He should be here by now. In the end, it was the Yarrow clan who grabbed Madame Ma's arm and rescued their son. Pang Xiao secretly sighed in relief. He tugged at the cuffs of his arrow sleeves, laughed heartily, and turned to leave quickly. Yarrow Chungu, who had been sitting on the side smoking, walked to the window and watched Pang Xiao leave with the 18 dignified young men. He shook his head and couldn't help but laugh. This kid. Pang Xiao led the people out of the inner residence. When they arrived at the main courtyard, they saw that the 210 sets of betrothal gifts were all adorned with red silk flowers. The servants carrying the dowry had already prepared everything. Chapter 412. You're here. Pang Xiao smiled as he walked towards Ji Zayu. I rarely see you in this color. I'm used to seeing you in either red or white. Ji Zayu said expressionlessly, I'm afraid that I'll steal your limelight. Pang Xiao choked, then laughed loudly, isn't that so? Our Lan is so handsome. If I'm compared to a pig or a dog, wouldn't I lose face? That's why. Ji Zayu shrugged. Pang Xiao couldn't help but laugh again. The soldiers of the Prince Consort's residence were all brothers of the Tiger Army who had followed Pang Xiao through fire and water. Although their commander had changed, their admiration and love for Pang Xiao hadn't changed at all. Seeing Pang Xiao looking over, these soldiers stood even straighter. Pang Xiao smiled and said, Today, I'll have to trouble you to follow this king. Yes. 88 soldiers answered in unison. It could be said that they were filled with killing intent. Their roars shook the sky, forcing the beautiful front yard of the Prince Consort's residence to be filled with killing intent. This sound caused the 18 Jinghu Wei soldiers to stand even straighter. Yarrow Chungu, Ma Shu, and Yarrow clan who had followed the sound were also stunned by the imposing manner as if they were about to go into battle to kill the enemy. After a long while, Ma Shu frowned and said in a low voice, What are they doing? No, I have to go talk to the Dai Fu. If they go to the in-laws' house like this, they'll be frightened. You are, don't worry. Yarrow Chungu pulled Ma Shu back and said with a smile, The child isn't a baby anymore. He has his own plans. You don't have to blindly interfere. How can I not worry? Which family would rush the bride's dowry like this? Bringing a group of thugs, are they rushing the bride's dowry or raiding the family? Mother, don't say too much. Yarrow Shu held Ma Shu's arm and shook it. She frowned at Ma Shu's inauspicious words. Madame Ma also knew that she had misspoken and hurriedly spat 3 times. At this moment, Pang Xiao and Ji Zayu had already mounted their horses and were heading out of the mansion. Then, there was the betrothal gift of 210 sets, and finally, 106 young soldiers with neat military uniforms. The group of people headed towards the Qin clan in a grandiose manner. Madame Ma and the Yarrow clan chased after them. When they saw the end of the long line turn the corner, they sighed at the same time. Mrs. Ma was not the only one who was worried. Now, even the Yarrow clan felt that it was a little scary for their son to bring this group of people to speed up the makeup process. While Qin Yining was teaching Lian Xiaoju how to read, Bing Tang ran in from outside. Miss, Wang Yi's makeup team is here. Qin Yining said in surprise, so early? Yes, and the team is especially spectacular. Bing Tang laughed uncontrollably. How is it spectacular? If the Sun clan hadn't come to her early this morning and told her that she couldn't go out and see the groom before the wedding, she really wanted to go out and see how spectacular it was. Bing Tang thought about the shocked expressions of the neighbors and couldn't help but laugh. Wang Yi and Prince Consort Ji brought troops to rush your dowry. The first one is a phoenix coronet and robe for you. The golden phoenix on the coronet has bright red gems in its mouth. Then there are 2 small yellow crocus, followed by 2 red coral ornaments. After that, there are 2 betrothal gifts. This servant didn't see clearly, but they are all treasures. It is said that there are 210 of them. The head of the procession has already entered our mansion, but the tail is still 2 streets away. Qin Yining thought about that scene and couldn't help but laugh. She naturally knew that Pang Xiao loved her, and she didn't care about material things or money. However, she was touched that Pang Xiao was willing to spend so much money to promote their wedding. Qin Yining was touched, but the Dowager Duchess and the others were already blinded by the practical betrothal gifts. Qin Huayuan, on the other hand, was calm as he watched the 2 handsome and noble young men, Pang Xiao and Ji Zheyu, ride over on tall horses. The young men behind them were all carefully selected. Qin Huayuan understood Pang Xiao's intentions and was naturally very happy. Pang Xiao dismounted from his horse and presented the list of betrothal gifts with both hands. Qin Huayuan didn't even look at it as he casually handed the list of betrothal gifts to the Sun clan. Then, he smiled and greeted Ji Zheyu. This old man is truly grateful that Prince Consort Ji is willing to come and help. Ji Zheyu knew that today was Pang Xiao's day to rush her makeup. Although he didn't like Qin Huayuan in his heart, he still put on a proper appearance and politely returned the greeting. He even said in an unprecedentedly gentle manner, Lord Qin, you don't have to be so polite. Wang Yi and I are good friends, so I naturally have to help. Qin Huayuan was a little surprised, but when he saw Pang Xiao and Ji Zheyu's expressions, he understood. He turned around and instructed the servants to properly entertain the servants who were carrying the betrothal gifts and the men who were accompanying them to rush their makeup. Then, he led Pang Xiao and Ji Zheyu into the room to drink tea and also approved of the wedding tomorrow. The atmosphere in the room was very good. In the courtyard, the old madam had long been dazzled by the rich betrothal gifts. Ayo, my heavens, this is a large amount. Before our family was robbed, all of our assets added together didn't have this many small yellow crocus. This is really too grand and too precious. With this money, our family will have a solid foundation. The old madam's hand trembled as she held the list of betrothal gifts. However, the Sun clan was extremely displeased with the old madam's greed and spoke in a low voice, these betrothal gifts will be carried to the prince's estate together with Sister Yi's dowry tomorrow. No matter how rich they are, they still have to be sent back. Sent back? The old madam's voice was sharp as she said, do you think we can send them back just because you say so? Are you the mistress or am I the mistress? I said we won't send them back. Upon hearing this, the Sun clan didn't argue with the old madam and only said, I'm marrying off my daughter, not selling her. We can't keep any of these betrothal gifts. If it was the old madam, would the old madam also let others think that we, the maternal family, are greedy for money? The old madam was speechless and could only turn red with anger. Inside the room, Pang Xiao and Qin Huayuan had already discussed the specific process of the bridal escort tomorrow. Since Qin Huayuan had already agreed to this marriage, he naturally appeared to be very easygoing. If he could make things convenient for Pang Xiao, he would try his best to make things convenient for him. When Pang Xiao nervously mentioned the matter of blocking the door tomorrow, Qin Huiyuan finally couldn't help but laugh. Don't worry, Sister Yi's cousins know what to do. I will instruct them. Only then did Pang Xiao let out a long sigh of relief and nodded with a smile. Although he could officially marry Qin Yining the next day, he didn't want to marry her. He still felt that time was passing too slowly. The bridal escort team came and left in a grandiose manner. The front and back courtyards of the family Qin residence were filled with betrothal gifts. There was really no place to put them, so they could only pile the betrothal gifts outside and arrange for special people to look after them. Qin Yining waited until Pang Xiao, Ji Zhayu, and the others had all left. Only then did he go out and take a look at the spectacular betrothal gifts. When he saw the 2 small yellow crocus in the corridor, Qin Yining also fell silent. Pang Xiao must have shown his family's wealth at this time. Chapter 413. Qin Huiyuan looked at the old madam's expectant eyes and was speechless for a moment. His Adam's apple rolled for a while before he said, "Mother, we can't keep these betrothal gifts." "Why?" The old madam suddenly stood up and shouted sharply, "Did that scourge from the Sun clan say something to you? Don't tell me you won't even listen to your mother's words now. I said keep it, so keep it. Not only the small yellow crocus, but also many other things. We have to keep them all. You don't manage the household, so you don't know how expensive firewood and rice are. Is it possible for the whole family to rely on such a small amount of salary? Your third brother's business is still moving here bit by bit. Do you know how many losses he has suffered in his business? Your wife said no, so it's no. Her brain must have been kicked by a donkey's hooves. She's simple-minded, but are you also simple-minded? She said she was afraid that Sister Yi would be looked down upon by her in-laws. I'm dying of laughter. Sister Yi was snatched away by Prince Zhongshuan long ago. What should have happened has happened. Her in-laws should have looked down on her long ago. Would they think highly of her just because she brought back some betrothal gifts? Qin Huiyuan silently looked at the old madam. After a while, he said, "Mother, is this what a grandmother should say the night before her granddaughter's wedding?" "You. Mengji, what do you mean?" The old madam looked at Qin Huiyuan in disbelief. Qin Huiyuan said, "The family's money was lost, but it wasn't Sister Yi who lost it. Why do we need her betrothal gifts to make up for it? How is this making up for it? Since Sister Yi is a member of the family Qin, everything she has belongs to the family Qin. She's already so rich and will be a Wangfei in the future. Is there anything wrong with taking out some property to make up for the family?" Qin Huiyuan shook his head and said, "Mother, what you're doing is wrong. Sister Yi doesn't owe our family anything. On the contrary, it's me, her father, who owes her a lot. I sacrificed her for the family, country, and all kinds of reasons. Although this marriage is barely satisfactory, it is still a marriage bestowed by your majesty, so it is still considered respectable. She was the daughter of a surrendered Dayan. How could she stand firm in the Wang mansion? As her maiden family, even if we can't back her up, we can't drag her down either. If we keep all these treasures and silvers to ourselves, how is Sister Yi going to raise her head in the prince's residence when we return? Besides, there's one thing that mother doesn't know. His son had just arrived at the Daiju dynasty. Where did he get the money? The house we're living in now was bought by Sister Yi with her own money." "What?" Old madam obviously couldn't believe it. She shook her head and said, "Impossible. Why not? Don't you know Sister Yi's character? She knew I didn't have any money, so she used my name and paid for all the expenses. She didn't tell everyone because she was afraid that old madam and her uncles would feel uncomfortable living there. She is a filial child. She didn't harm you or make you lose your family. Why can't you be more considerate of her?" Old madam pursed her lips and stood in the same place. Looking at Qin Huiyuan's serious face, she felt that her position in the family was in jeopardy. Now, even the most filial brother Meng wasn't willing to listen to her. What else could she say? Forget it, forget it. I said to keep the money. Was it for my own use? Didn't I also do it for this family? Since you said not to keep it, then I won't keep it. Qin Huiyuan secretly sighed in relief and said, It's good that mother can get over it. Son only has this one daughter. I only want to treat her as well as possible. I hope mother can understand son's feelings. I understand. It's already like this. How can we understand? Qin Huiyuan saw that old madam was still unhappy, so he lowered his voice and said some pleasant things to coax her. Qin Yining didn't know all of this, because she went to bed early after washing up. The next morning, Qin Yining was woken up by the Sun Clan. Sister Yi, quickly get up to comb your hair. It's getting late. The Sun Clan was wearing festive red clothes today. They looked very happy. Qin Yining rubbed the corners of her eyes and said, Mother, doesn't the bride's escort come at night? Why do I have to get up so early? You little girl, which bride would sleep until the sun is high up in the sky? There are many things to do. If you don't get up, Quan Fu, who will comb your hair, will come later. Qin Yining was helpless. She could only listen to the Sun Clan and get up to wash up. She casually ate some snacks for breakfast and was pressed in front of the dressing table. The mother and daughter's gazes met in the mirror. They looked at each other and smiled. The Sun Clan pinched Qin Yining's face and sighed, time really flies. Sister Yi has only been back for a few days and you're about to get married. Mother hasn't thought about being intimate with you enough. As the Sun Clan spoke, tears welled up in her eyes. Qin Yining quickly got up and hugged the Sun Clan. She comforted her, Mother, don't be sad and don't worry. Wang Yi will treat his daughter well. Moreover, the Wang estate is in the capital. It will be easy for us to meet in the future. I know. I'm not sad. I'm just happy. The Sun Clan sniffed and smiled at the maidservants in the room. You've all gone through life and death with Sister Yi. I trust you the most. In the future, when Sister Yi goes to the Wang estate, you have to take care of her and remind her. Yes, madam. We understand. Bing Tang and the others bowed in acknowledgement. Eldest sister-in-law, Madam Quan Fu is here. Outside the door, second madam informed her and went to greet Madam Quan Fu. After Pang Xiao and Qin Huiyuan decided on the candidate for Madam Quan Fu, Pang Xiao went to invite her. Madam Miao, the old madam of the Marquis of Champion Su family, was invited. This madam's family was harmonious and loving. She had a son and a daughter and many grandchildren. She was indeed a madam of Quan Fu. The Sun Clan quickly went to the door to welcome Madam Miao and led her in with second Madam Quan Fu. Madam Miao was in her early 60s, but her hair was black and shiny. She didn't look old at all. When Qin Yining's eyes met hers in the mirror, Madam Miao praised, "What a beautiful young lady." She took out a cotton thread, dipped it in powder, and began to scrunch Qin Yining's face. She was even muttering Ji Xiong's dialect. After scrunching his face, she trimmed his messy sideburns. Then, she took out a rhinoceros horn comb and combed Qin Yining's hair. There was a saying to comb one's hair. As she combed one's hair, she had to say auspicious words such as, "With a comb, one can raise the case to the same level as the eyebrows, second uncle's family is blessed." Qin Yining didn't say a word as he followed Madam Miao's actions. He looked at himself in the mirror and realized that today was actually his wedding day. For a moment, Qin Yining couldn't accept it. Time really passed too quickly. It was as if she was still worried about her and Pang Xiao's future. Now, all the problems had been solved. How lucky was she to have a family who loved her so much and Pang Xiao who treated her so sincerely. Perhaps the suffering she had endured in the past 10 years was to save up all the blessings for now. Young lady, this phoenix coronet is the most unique one I've ever seen. Madam Miao put on Qin Yining's 3 phoenix coronet, which was a phoenix perching on a parasol tree. Then, she smoothed out the ruby beaded tassels in front of his face. Chapter 414. Seeing that Qin Yining lowered her eyes and didn't speak, her delicate features showing a bit of shyness, the women at the side all laughed. Second madam, who came to help, said with a smile, "You're still talking about the phoenix coronet. Yesterday, we went to the Wang Fu to shop. I can be considered to have been rich before and have seen some of the world. But other than the imperial palace, I haven't seen a residence more magnificent than the Wang Fu. Wang Yi's care for our family's daughter can be seen from the layout of the residence. The flowers and the grass, the gold and the silver. Every single one of them was exquisitely decorated. It can be seen how much Wang Yi and the old madam of the Wang Fu like Miss as usual. On the day of the betrothal gifts, the maternal family would go to the bridal chamber to shop. Yesterday, second madam accompanied the Sun clan to the bridal chamber and also met with Ma Shi and the Yarrow clan. Although the Sun clan wasn't satisfied with this marriage, after meeting the in-laws, she could more or less relax. Hearing second madam's words, the Sun clan's uneasiness and worry finally eased a bit. Thinking about it, with such a gentle mother-in-law and mother-in-law, even if Wang Yi's temper was a bit bad, her daughter wouldn't suffer too much, right? Qin Yining saw her mother's expression in the mirror and then met second madam's gaze. She smiled gratefully. Second madam also returned her a sincere smile. In the end, they were all one family and had gone through trials and tribulations together. Now, other than Qin Yining, the only daughter left in the family Qin was 8th young Miss Qin Baoning of the 3rd branch. Qin Huaining was an ungrateful wretch, so second madam also kept a respectful distance from her. She didn't have the fortune of being her mother-in-law. Now, she just hoped that the two daughters of the family Qin could marry well. Qin Yining's husband was noble and could help the family in the future. He could also help Qin Baoning find a good husband. 4th older sister. The beaded curtain was lifted, and 8th young mistress, Qin Huaining, and Han's 2nd young mistress walked in one after another. Qin Yining had finished combing her hair, and the phoenix coronet was placed on the dressing table. She was looking up as Madame Quan Fu helped her put on her lipstick. She was wearing a snow-white inner garment, and a bright red wedding gown with gold and silver threads was unfolded on the hanger behind her. The bright red color was dazzling. Miss 8 exclaimed in surprise when she saw her. She walked up to her happily and said, "Fourth sister, you are so beautiful today." Qin Huaining also walked over, lowered his head, and curtsied. He said in a low voice, "Congratulations." Madame Miao's hands stopped moving. Qin Yining smiled and said, "Thank you very much." He then turned to Han's 2nd young mistress and said, "Second Tang Suro, you've also come. Come and sit." Han's 2nd young mistress also smiled and said good. For a moment, the womenfolk in the house were chatting and laughing happily. Only old madam stayed in her room and smoked. She didn't seem to be attracted by the laughter. After Qin Yining finished putting on her makeup, she went behind the screen and asked Ji Yun and the others to help her put on the wedding gown. On the bright red brocade, there were flowers and riches embroidered with golden threads. The colorful threads on the collar shone with a faint silver light and outlined the lifelike dragon and phoenix. The snow-white collar was pinned with an exquisite ruby collar. The well-tailored sleeves outlined her well-proportioned figure. The corners of the 8 dresses of the same color were also embroidered with an exquisite and small Ruyi pattern with red threads. Qin Yining came out from behind the screen, and Madame Quan Fu tied her up and put on the phoenix coronet. The ruby beads in Jin Feng's mouth swayed slightly behind her head and on both sides of her head. The tassel pendant used to cover her face just happened to cover her face. She felt that it was a hindrance, so she chatted and pinned it on both sides of her head. The house was silent. Qin Yining blinked. Then, she smiled and pulled the material of the gown around her waist, saying, "Mother, why do I feel that the gown is a bit tight?" Her words broke the silence in the house. Sun Clan's mother hurriedly walked forward and pulled Qin Yining's hand to look around. She smiled and said, No, it's just right. It's not tight at all. Is it?" Qin Yining looked down and smiled. "Mother must be right." She held Sun Clan's hand with both hands. "Mother, don't be nervous. The days in the future will get better and better." Sun Clan's eyes turned red in an instant. She held back her tears and sniffled. Good. My daughter will definitely raise her eyebrows with Wang Yi and grow old together. Sister Yi, Mother really can't bear to part with you. You haven't enjoyed a day of happiness by my side since you were young. After you came home, Mother didn't treat you well. I haven't had the chance to make it up to you, yet you're about to get married. Sun Clan's tears fell like beads from a broken necklace when she said this. Qin Yining's eyes also turned red, and tears fell as well. "Mother, this isn't your fault. We still have a long way to go. We still have a lot of time. Sun Clan's mother choked with sobs and nodded repeatedly. Second Madam wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief. She smiled and came forward to support Sun Clan's arm. Eldest sister-in-law, don't provoke Sister Yi. She should cry, but the Marchioness of Champion just put on makeup for Sister Yi. Madame Miao laughed when she heard this. Our daughter is like a fairy. Even when she cries, she's like a pear blossom bathed in rain. I can't take my eyes off her. Her beautiful words made all the women in the house laugh. After Qin Yining finished dressing up, she sat on the bed. The phoenix coronet was too heavy, so she placed it on the dressing table. Sun Clan's mother and Second Madam led Madame Miao out, and they were busy entertaining the guests. Only Miss Ba and Qin Huaining were left in the room to keep her company. Bing Tang, Qiu Lu, Ji Yun, and Xian Yun were all on guard against Qin Huaining causing trouble today, so they found a place to sew in the room. Miss Ba leaned over to Qin Yining's side and chatted with her. Although she had experienced a lot, Miss Ba was still as sincere and innocent as before. Qin Huaining saw that they hit it off so well that she couldn't get a word in edgewise. Moreover, Qin Yining's current status was too high for her to reach, and she couldn't compare to her. She simply didn't want others to say that she was trying to curry favor with the rich and powerful. Qin Yining was happy to see Qin Huaining like this, so she simply chatted with Miss Ba about some interesting things and told her, after I leave home, if anything happens at home, you can come to me. If there are any conflicts, you can also help mediate. My mother has a short temper, and when I'm not by her side, there's no one to advise her. Help me take care of her. Fourth older sister, don't worry. Miss Ba held Qin Yining's hand and promised, eldest aunt has always been very good to me. Even if fourth older sister didn't ask, I would still do the same. When Qin Yining heard this, she felt slightly relieved. Because they were afraid that they would have to go to the toilet again after getting on the sedan chair, the Sun Clan only allowed Qin Yining to eat a bowl of porridge for lunch. They didn't allow her to eat anything else. After taking a short nap, she redid her makeup. The sky gradually darkened, and the auspicious time was about to arrive. The Sun Clan's mother was clearly more nervous. When she held Qin Yining's hand, her palms were sweating. She told the servant girls to leave for the time being, and she only sat on the bed with Qin Yining and whispered many intimate words to her. Chapter 4:15. Did he mean that he wanted to let Pang Xiao do whatever he wanted? Right at this moment, the joyous sounds of gongs and drums could be heard from outside, followed by the crackling sounds of firecrackers. Bing Tang ran in and said at the door, Madam, Wang Yi's wedding procession is already at the door. Elder Yu and Second Master Han are blocking the door. However, this servant went around to the main street to take a look. Wang Yi's wedding procession is simply too spectacular. It's a sea of elite soldiers, and each of them is riding a tall horse. Bing Tang was clearly shocked by the spectacular wedding procession. When he spoke, his cheeks were flushed red, and he spoke so quickly that it was as if he was spilling beans. The Sun Clan was dumbfounded when they heard this. He brought soldiers to escort the bride. Isn't he too rude? Is he here to escort the bride or to kidnap the bride? The Sun Clan even suspected that if Qin Yu and Qin Han's problems were too difficult, Pang Xiao would bring soldiers and directly charge into the residence. Although Pang Xiao had treated Qin Yining well in the past, and the Sun Clan had also seen how Pang Xiao had curried favor with their daughter in Dian. However, he had also taken advantage of Qin Yining before. Thinking about it carefully, this was a rotten debt that couldn't be cleared up. However, Your Majesty had decreed a marriage, and no one had the right to say no. While the Sun Clan was deeply worried, Bing Tang had already run out to watch the commotion. Madame Miao and Ji Yun supported Qin Yining together and helped her tidy up her wedding attire. They also prepared the treasured vase that she would carry when she got into the sedan chair later. They also prepared the auspicious red wedding veil for the dragon and phoenix. Qin Yining pursed her bright red lips and clutched her sleeves to wipe the sweat from her palms. When it was time for her to get married, she was still nervous. The Sun Clan placed the golden phoenix hairpin in place and fixed the phoenix coronet for her. She held Qin Yining's hand and looked at her daughter seriously. She nodded and said, "Good, good. There's nothing left out. Sister Yi, mother will go out first. Later, let them help you to old madam's room to kowtow and bid farewell." "Yes." Qin Yining nodded. The members of the Sun clan turned around and walked out of the door. As they walked towards the main room, they used their sleeves to wipe the tears from the corners of their eyes. Miss. Bing Tang ran in again and said with a smile, "Wang Yi is too amazing." Wang Yi was able to answer the two young masters' questions. They didn't stop him and opened the door willingly. Wang Yi even rewarded the servants with a tael of silver ingot. Qin Yining's heart thumped wildly when she heard Bing Tang's words. Through the swaying tassels in front of her eyes, she felt that the furnishings in the room were dazzling and surreal. At this moment, the sound of firecrackers came closer and closer. The make-up music became even more urgent. A matron of honor shouted from outside the door, "Welcome the bride and bid farewell to your parent, Miss Qin." Madame Miao held Qin Yining's hand and helped her get up. She straightened out her skirt and smiled. "Let's go. We should go to the main room." After coming out of Qin Yining's room, they walked along the corridor covered with a red carpet. After turning a corner, they entered old madam's main room. There were many people standing in the room. The old madam was sitting at the head of the table. Qin Huayuan and the Sun clan were sitting on either side of her. Second uncle, second aunt, third uncle, and other elders were also standing to the side. The women of the guests' families were all invited by the family Qin. When Qin Yining's figure appeared at the door, the room suddenly quieted down for a moment. The neon lights under the night sky became her background. The colorful women around her all paled in comparison. When she walked over leisurely, her slightly rippling skirt was like a red lotus blooming. The golden phoenix Buyao trembled slightly and spread its wings, as if it was about to fly. The ruby tassels reflected the candlelight and sparkled brightly. Even with all the jewels and jewels, they couldn't hide her beauty. It would not be overshadowed by the jewelry. It would only make her look more noble and dazzling. While everyone's attention was on Qin Yining had already seen Pang Xiao, who was wearing a red python robe. He was in high spirits and was incomparably handsome. He wore a purple and gold crown on his head, and his hair was neatly tied up. Under his sword-like eyebrows, his usually sharp and cold phoenix eyes were smiling and filled with gentleness. His thin lips were slightly curved under his high nose. His smile was not exaggerated, but it made people feel that he was in a good mood. The red python robe made him look like a sharp sword that had been unsheathed. But the moment they saw Qin Yining, everyone felt that this famous fiend, Wang Yi, seemed to be like a treasured sword that had been sheathed. In an instant, he softened. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Qin Yining lifted her skirt and knelt on the brocade cushion that Mammy Qin had brought. She first bowed to the old madam, then looked at Qin Huayuan and the Sun clan. "Father, mother, this unfilial daughter bids farewell to the two elders." It was rare for Qin Huayuan to wear a purple brocade robe. After some grooming, he looked like he was 5 years younger. He looked even more handsome, like a banished immortal. He looked at Qin Yining with an indescribable tenderness in his eyes. He said in a gentle voice, "Sister Yi, from today onwards, you will be the wife of the Pang family. You must be filial to your elders, docile and respectful, serve your husband, and be a gentle and virtuous wife. Do you understand?" "Your daughter understands." Qin Huayuan nodded. As usual, after the father's lecture, the bride would be carried to the sedan chair by the elder brother. However, Qin Huayuan stood up and personally helped Qin Yining up. He said, "Although you are the wife of the Pang family, you are still the daughter of my family Qin. You are the only pearl in my palm. No matter what happens, you must remember that your father and the family Qin will be your most solid support." Qin Yining suddenly raised her head. She couldn't believe it, and the shock in her heart couldn't be expressed in words. When the members of the Sun clan heard this, tears fell from their eyes. However, they also stood up and nodded in agreement. "Father." Qin Yining found that her voice was hoarse. She hurriedly cleared her throat and said, "Your daughter understands." The guests invited by the family Qin were stunned. Was he lecturing his daughter or provoking the Prince Zhongshiren? Everyone looked at Pang Xiao's face at the same time. However, they could only see Pang Xiao's handsome smiling face. Everyone had the same thought. The Prince Zhongshiren was really loyal to the emperor and patriotic. He knew when to yield and when to stand tall. Your daughter can't fulfill her filial piety in front of my parents in the future. I can't please Madam Dowager. Please take care of your health. Qin Yining seriously exhorted. Qin Huayuan's throat trembled, and he nodded silently. At this scene, even the Madam Dowager, who had been unhappy in her heart, also wiped her tears. Sister Yi, you should live a simple life as husband and wife. This is the greatest filial piety to your grandmother. Qin Yining smiled and nodded. Yes, your granddaughter will remember. The auspicious time has arrived. At this moment, the matron of honor's high-pitched voice came from outside. Immediately, joyous music was played, and the firecrackers were lit again. Chapter 416. Madame Miao took the red veil and covered Qin Yining's head. Qin Yu was already standing at the door with his back to the room. He said, "Fourth sister, come, big brother will carry you." Qin Yining supported Madame Miao and the matron of honor, walked to the door, and climbed onto Qin Yu's back. Qin Yu steadily carried Qin Yining down the steps and walked out along the red carpet. Qin Yining heard Qin Yu's advice amidst the joyous noise. If you are bullied at your in-laws' house, you don't have to be afraid. Although the prince is in a high position, our family is not to be trifled with. 3 cobblers are equal to 1 zhuge liang. What's more, eldest uncle is so powerful. If you are wronged, don't keep it to yourself. Don't be overcautious and make yourself suffer. If there is anything, come back and tell your family. Qin Yining's heart felt like it was soaked in a hot spring in the dead of winter. Although this family had been scattered by reality and disaster, and there were indeed some people in the family who had ulterior motives. But generally speaking, her family was very warm, and her family was very good to her. Thank you, big brother. I know. Big brother, take care of yourself. I will come back when I am free. If anything happens at home, don't hide it from me. If my father doesn't tell me, big brother can tell me. Alas, don't worry. If anything happens, I will definitely come to you. I was a little worried at first, but when I saw the way Wang Yi looked at you, I was relieved. While speaking, Qin Yu carried Qin Yining to the sedan chair. The matron of honor and Madame Chuanfu helped Qin Yining onto the sedan chair. They handed the precious bottle to her and said, "Hold it tight. Don't drop it." Qin Yining responded, and the sedan chair's curtain was closed. Qin Yining could only see a gorgeous red. Although she was curious, she couldn't lift the curtain to look outside. However, Bing Tang, Qiu Lu, Xian Yun, Ji Yun, and Lian Xiaoju all followed the sedan chair. They were all part of the dowry and followed Qin Yining to the prince's mansion. Bing Tang held Lian Xiaozong's hand and looked left and right. She was so excited that her eyes were shining. Miss, Wang Yi didn't throw peanuts and red dates into the crowd along the way, but copper coins. Fistfuls of copper coins. Listen to the loud cheers outside. Everyone has taken the money and is congratulating Wang Yi. Yes, Miss Ji Yun turned around and looked into the distance. She was so shocked that she was speechless. Behind our sedan chair is the joyful board. Behind it is the dowry team. Lei Oi has prepared 128 chests of dowry for you, plus 210 chests of betrothal gifts. A total of 390 lift. Wang Yi hired elite soldiers to deliver the dowry. Every 2 people carry the dowry, and there's a long tail behind us. It's bright red. We've already turned 2 corners. I reckon the dowry behind us hasn't even left the mansion yet. Is that Prince Consort Ji? Xian Yun also craned her neck and said in surprise, "Miss, Prince Consort Ji is leading the tiger army to escort us." Qin Yining, who was in the sedan chair with 8 cheers, heard the maidservants' surprised and happy voices. She actually felt a little regretful that she couldn't see such a grand scene. The disappointment of bidding farewell to her parents and the past in her heart had already been washed away by this joyous atmosphere. What welcomed her was a brand new identity and a brand new life. She was Pang Xiao's princess consort, and Pang Xiao was her husband. They would support each other and share honor and disgrace. They would be sweet together until they grew old. Qin Yining smiled happily. She once again felt that all the suffering she had suffered for the past 10 years was for the sake of her future happiness. If time went back to when she was 7 years old, she would never have thought that the beautiful big brother who had reached out to her when she was in danger would be her husband. The citizens of the capital had not seen such a lively scene in a long time. Even the eldest princess's wedding last year was not as grand as this. There was a high-spirited groom on a tall horse, a large sedan chair with 8 chairs, and several miles of dowry behind it. There were also the soldiers and the handsome general leading the procession. All of this could be summed up in one word: 10 miles of red dowry. The king's mansion was right in front of them, and it was filled with joy once again. The firecrackers at the entrance of the king's mansion sounded and the procession stopped. Pang Xiao dismounted from his horse and took the bow. He pointed at the top of the sedan chair and fired 3 arrows. The arrows were neatly arranged and nailed to the top of the sedan chair at the same angle, causing all the guests to cheer. Especially the Tiger Army and Jinghu Wei. Seeing their god of war so spirited and confident, they all began to cheer. The sedan chair was lowered and Qin Yining came out with the help of the matron of honor. She stepped over the brazier and gave the bottle to the matron of honor. Then she took one end of the red silk. From her angle, she could see the large silk flower in the middle of the red silk as well as Pang Xiao's red embroidered robe and black boots. The one holding her hand was her husband. He was going to bring her into his life completely. Qin Yining stepped through the gates of the king's mansion and walked on the red carpet to the main hall amidst the cheers. The sound of the firecrackers came to an end, and what came next was the whistle of fireworks flying into the sky and the sound of large fireworks exploding in the sky. The brilliant light of the fireworks lit up the brocade on her body and also lit up the courtyard of the king's mansion. When the crowd came to the main hall, Yarrow Chungu, Madame Ma, and the Yarrow clan, who were dressed in red, were already sitting at the head of the table according to their status. The front hall was packed with guests. The master of ceremonies sang loudly, "First bow to the heavens and earth." Qin Yining was helped by the matron of honor to turn around and bow down. "Second bow, Your Majesty has arrived." Before the master of ceremonies could finish his second sentence, the eunuch's sharp voice covered his words. Everyone was shocked and hurriedly looked outside. They saw a bright yellow figure striding in under the protection of the imperial bodyguards. "Your Majesty, long live, long live, long live." The guests bowed one after another and shouted "Long live" 3 times. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining also had to bow. Li Chitian was already in front of them. He put his arm around Pang Xiao's shoulder and said with a smile, "Good brother, you're dressed up very well today. I'm late, but I'm not too late, right? Your Majesty, why did you leave the palace? Your safety, it's fine. My sworn younger brother is getting married. How can I, as his older brother, not come to the wedding wine?" Li Chitian smiled and looked at Yarrow Chungu, Madame Ma, and the Yarrow clan. When he saw that Pang Xiao's mother was not here, he choked for a moment but did not show it. Yarrow Chungu hurriedly brought his wife and children to bow to Li Chitian. Li Chitian was not willing to accept and helped the 3 people up. Under the invitation of the 3 people, he sat at the head of the table. Li Chitian smiled and said, "Continue, don't be delayed by me." When the master of ceremonies saw Li Chitian, he did not know how to speak. It was the head eunuch Li Guanwen who was quick-witted and said with a smile, "Second bow to the emperor." Qin Yining turned around and bowed with Pang Xiao. Husband and wife bow to each other. Qin Yining turned around with the help of the matron of honor and bowed again. "Send them to the bridal chamber. The ceremony is complete." As soon as Li Guanwen finished speaking, the sound of fireworks outside suddenly became louder. Chapter 417. Qin Yining's line of sight was blocked by the bridal veil, so she could only look down at her feet. She was helped to sit on the edge of the bed, and then she felt the bedding beside her sink. A strong person with a strong sense of presence sat beside her. She looked down and could see Pang Xiao's red robe and slender legs. Madame Quan Fu stepped forward with a smile and pressed the corner of Qin Yining's dress on Pang Xiao's robe. Then she bumped into a tray with a wedding scale tied with a red concentric knot. "Groom, please lift the bridal veil and be satisfied with our Yu Yi from now on." Pang Xiao pursed his lips, his handsome face expressionless. Only he knew that his hand, which had never hesitated to cut off the enemy's head on the battlefield, was now trembling as he held the wedding scale. He looked at the delicate person beside him and lifted the auspicious red veil with trembling hands, handing it to Madame Quan Fu along with the wedding scale. The room was brightly lit. Under the warm orange light, Qin Yining lowered her eyes. Even the luxurious gold ornaments couldn't hide her stunning face. The bridal chamber was quiet for a moment. Pang Xiao's slender and strong hands lifted the row of hair in front of her phoenix coronet and pinned it on the golden phoenixes on both sides. Beautiful mountains and beautiful eyes, a fine nose and beautiful lips, truly beautiful beyond compare. All the guests who came to the bridal chamber to watch the fun held their breaths and only came back to their senses after a long time. Madame Quan Fu recited a poem. Yi Erqi joined the brilliant purple mill, fanning the clouds and the moon. 2 lines of praise, kneeling to welcome each other, scattering fruits to contend with the song many times. As she recited, children from the guests' families sprinkled red dates, peanuts, longans, and lotus seeds on Pang Xiao and Qin Yining, as well as on the wedding bed behind them. The guests became lively, shouting auspicious words like "give birth to a noble child soon," and "grow old together." After scattering the veil, Madame Quan Fu brought over a tray with 2 pure gold wine cups. "Invite the bride and groom to drink wine together, and live happily ever after." Qin Yining raised his hand to pick up the wine cup. He touched Pang Xiao's hand slightly before pulling away. She looked up at Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao also held his wine cup and looked over with lowered eyes. Their eyes met. Pang Xiao's gaze was so hot that it could melt people. Qin Yining lowered his eyes and avoided the attack. Pang Xiao saw her rosy face, and his heart was filled with love and tenderness. He stretched out his long arm and held her arm. Qin Yining's face came closer and closer to his. Finally, they drank the nuptial wine beside each other's face and shoulder. "Great!" Everyone cheered and gave their blessings. Qin Yining put down his wine cup and lowered his head. Madame Chuanfu brought a plate of dumplings and handed a pair of ivory chopsticks to Qin Yining. Qin Yining was a little surprised. He secretly wondered what kind of etiquette was this, but he still took the ivory chopsticks and took a bite. The dumplings seemed to have only been soaked in hot water. The dough inside was still raw, and the sugar had not melted yet. Qin Yining frowned and said, "It's raw." When he looked up, he saw Pang Xiao's smiling eyes. Madame Quan Fu laughed out loud. "Did everyone hear that?" The princess consort said it herself. "It's raw." All the female guests in the room laughed and cheered. "We heard that." The princess consort said it's raw. Princess consort, quickly give Wang Yi a little air. Qin Yining speechlessly spat out the raw dumpling wrapper and lowered his head with a red face. There seemed to be sugar on his lips, and it tasted sweet when he pursed them. "The ceremony is over. Everyone, let's go out and eat." Madame Quan Fu organized everyone to go out. Soon, only Pang Xiao and Qin Yining were left in the bridal chamber. The 2 of them sat side by side on the step bed. Not far away, there was a square table covered with a red tablecloth. The red candles were burning brightly. Suddenly, there was a pop sound and a flower burst out. Pang Xiao cleared his throat and said in a hoarse voice, "My mother said that an explosion of candles is a good sign." "Yes." Qin Yining lowered his head and didn't know what to say. Pang Xiao said again, You, the phoenix crown is heavy, right? Let me help you take it off." "Sure." Qin Yining looked at him with a smile. "My mother woke me up early this morning to comb my hair, put on my face, and put on my makeup. It was clearly the right time at night, but everything was ready at noon. This phoenix crown is made of solid gold. My neck is about to be crushed." Pang Xiao got up at this time. With Qin Yining's cooperation, he first removed the few hairpins used to hold the crown in place. Then, He carefully took off the phoenix crown with both hands, for fear that he would pull her hair and cause her pain. Without a few kilograms of gold and gemstones on her head, Qin Yining moved her neck and heard a crack sound. She rubbed her neck and let out a long breath. If I wear this thing every day, I won't be able to stand it. I don't even dare to lower my head with such a heavy thing on my head. Pang Xiao laughed. He sat beside her and massaged her neck and shoulders with one hand. The touch under his hand was so slender and smooth that Pang Xiao's heart rippled. He hurriedly coughed and withdrew his hand. Sister Yi, I'll go out to propose a toast first. Qin Yining looked at Pang Xiao's face and knew what he was thinking just now. She nodded with a red face. Go ahead. It'll be rude if you're late. Okay. By the way, I asked someone to prepare some food for you. I'll ask them to bring it to you later. Take off your makeup and rest first. Don't wait for me. I don't know how long this group of people will make a scene. Qin Yining nodded again. Pang Xiao looked at her soft and beautiful face and couldn't help but smile and touch her face. I'll go first. Qin Yining didn't dare to look into his eyes at this time. She only lowered her long eyelashes and nodded silently. She didn't know that her appearance made Pang Xiao's heart burn more and more. Pang Xiao stumbled away. If he stayed a little longer, he was afraid that he couldn't control himself and couldn't go out to propose a toast. When Pang Xiao left, Qin Yining finally let out a sigh of relief. Just now, he had stared at his prey as though he could eat her. Thinking of how the Sun Clan had said that he could do whatever he wanted, Qin Yining's ears burned. He had to cover his face to cool himself down. At this time, there was a light knock on the door. Then the door was pushed open with a creak. Bing Tang, Ji Yun, Xian Yun, and Qiu Lu walked in with food boxes and other things. Bing Tang smiled and said, Wang Yi just ordered that Wang Fei must not be tired or hungry. He told us servants to serve Wang Fei some food first. Wang Yi is really attentive to Wang Fei. He said that this chicken soup was simmered over a small fire in the kitchen. The bones and meat are all soft. He added red dates and wolfberries. It's good for Wang Fei's body to eat. Qiu Lu happily put down the food boxes and ladled a bowl of chicken soup for Qin Yining. Then, she placed a few plates of exquisite desserts and side dishes on the table. Qin Yining was indeed starving. The Sun Clan was afraid that something would happen midway, so they didn't give her anything to eat the entire day. At this time, Ji Yun and Xian Yun helped her take off her wedding clothes. After she untied her hair, she sat at the square table in her inner clothes and wolfed down the food. After eating 2 desserts, a few side dishes, and drinking half a bowl of soup, Qin Yining finally let out a sigh of relief. I feel like I'm alive again. The 4 servant girls couldn't help but laugh when they saw this. Qin Yining asked again, Where's the small kanji? Chapter 4:18. Little kanji is in my room. She's already asleep. Princess consort, you don't know, but our courtyard is very spacious. There aren't many people in the Wangfu, so we servants all have our own rooms. The family Qin's residence in the capital wasn't big. They were already used to sharing a room in pairs. They were still not used to the Wangfu's living conditions being so good all of a sudden. Qin Yining drank the soup slowly and said with a smile, You've all gone through life and death with me. I treat you as sisters and friends in my heart. The conditions here are good, so of course it's good. If there's anything wrong, don't just help me to save trouble. You have to tell me everything. Do you understand? I understand. Princess consort, you're different from before. Wang Yi dotes on you so much. As long as you ask, Wang Yi will definitely obey. We servants have benefited from this. Ji Yun joked with a smile. Qin Yining didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Look at you all. You must be living an easy life. You're becoming more and more unruly. The maidservants all burst into laughter. After Qin Yining finished eating, she went to wash up. Qiu Lu carried a set of aqua-red muslin nightgown to the washroom. Princess consort, Madam specially ordered this servant to wear this tonight. Qin Yining blushed when she saw the muslin nightgown. What kind of clothes are these? I look like I'm not wearing anything. Qiu Lu's face also turned red. Princess consort, Madam ordered it. You should change. Perhaps this is how it should be. Qin Yining took the nightgown. She really wanted to find a hole to hide in. But thinking about it, the servants accompanying her in the room weren't married yet. They didn't know much about the world. She and Pang Xiao were husband and wife after all. It was inevitable that they would encounter some embarrassing things. This was just the beginning. Qin Yining couldn't help but cover her face. She had no choice but to change. The nightgown wasn't very transparent. It was an aqua-red tunic with narrow sleeves and silk pants of the same color. Other than her shoulders being vaguely visible, everything else was normal. This made Qin Yining feel more at ease. When he went out, Bing Tang and the others had also gone out. Qiu Lu smiled, bowed, and left. Qin Yining sat down on the heated Kang bed facing the window across from the bed and casually picked up a book to read. It was a travel book, talking about the folk customs of the Northwest. Qin Yining had never been to the Northwest before, so he was immersed in watching with relish. When Pang Xiao came back, he saw the beauty leaning against a big pillow and reading under the light. Her long hair was draped over her back and shoulders. Her gauze dress was thin, and her slender neck, delicate collarbone, and round shoulders were all softened by a faint matte light. The red tube top could barely hide her curves. Pang Xiao felt that the wine he had just drunk had turned into magma flowing through his limbs and bones. Qin Yining only came back to his senses when he heard footsteps. Seeing Pang Xiao standing in front of her with a slightly red face, she couldn't help but smile and say, "You're back? Should I ask them to fetch water for you to wash up?" Pang Xiao didn't say a word and only stared at her. Qin Yining put down the book with some worry. She knelt on the heated Kang bed and raised a soft white hand to touch his slightly hot cheeks. "What's wrong? Did you drink too much wine?" Pang Xiao picked up Qin Yining and strode to the bed. He gently placed her on the red brocade mattress. Her jet-black hair was scattered on the pillow. Her red clothes and red mattress made her skin look as white and clean as new snow. After a series of movements, her collar was already open. She was lying on her back, and she didn't realize that she was naturally charming. Pang Xiao couldn't hold back anymore. He didn't dare to go overboard in the past because he was afraid of hurting her. Now that he could finally have her, he wasn't a man if he held back any longer. Fiery kisses landed on her forehead, the tip of her nose, and her lips. Qin Yining gradually sank into the warm and strong embrace. She remembered what her mother taught her: let him do whatever he wants. She really endured the pain and allowed him to do whatever he wanted. This indulgence lasted until midnight. The man was like a beast that was never satisfied. When his large hand reached over again, Qin Yining finally picked up the pillow and threw it at his chest. "We still have to serve tea tomorrow. If you move again, you can sleep on the floor." Okay. I won't move." Pang Xiao held her in his arms and let her rest on his shoulder. Under his touch, her forehead was full of sweat and her body was also wet. Pang Xiao lovingly and satisfactorily kissed her forehead. He wiped her body with a warm handkerchief and put away the handkerchief. Only then did he crawl back into bed. He hugged the soft and warm body in his arms and fell asleep contentedly. Qin Yining felt as if she was hugging a big stove. The weather in May in the north was still a little cold. She usually curled up into a ball when she slept, but today, she slept with her limbs stretched out. Both her feet were unbelievably warm. When she opened her eyes in a daze, she saw the bright red canopy of 100 children and thousands of grandchildren. She was still a little dazed. After a long while, she remembered that yesterday was her wedding night. "Good morning, Sister Yi." A deep and hoarse male voice sounded by her ear. Qin Yining turned her head and a kiss fell on her lips. Pang Xiao was lying on his side beside her with his head propped up. The bright red brocade quilt covered his chest down. His exposed shoulders and arms showed the strong lines of his muscles. There were also scars on his shoulders from when he saved her. Qin Yining's face turned red. She pulled the quilt to cover her face. Pang Xiao was amused by her cute reaction and laughed. He pulled her into his arms and asked with concern, "Does your body still hurt? I have a very good ointment." Do you want me to apply it for you? She punched his chest mercilessly. Get out. I don't want to talk to you. Pang Xiao laughed loudly again. He didn't have the heart to tease her, but her reaction was too cute. Pang Xiao forcefully planted a few kisses on her cheeks and forehead. Then he got up and put on his inner clothes and called for people to come in. Bing Tang, Qiu Lu, Ji Yun, and Xian Yun came in with hot water, brocade handkerchiefs, and other things. They all had red faces. Some went to warm the water, while others came to serve Qin Yining. Bing Tang saw the bruises on Qin Yining's body and scolded in a low voice, "Did you eat meat or something?" He took out a box of ointment from his sleeve and gave it to Qin Yining. He lowered his voice even more, "Princess consort, this ointment is very good. If you use this, you'll be fine in a day." Qin Yining took the box with a red face and nodded, "Thank you." Bing Tang smiled and said, "Then you should get up and change your clothes first." Ji Yun and Bing Tang helped Qin Yining change his clothes and wash his face. Pang Xiao waved Qiu Lu and Xian Yun away. He washed his face and put on his clothes. Then he sat on the edge of the heated Kang bed with his hair down and watched Qin Yining do his makeup in front of the mirror. If it was in the past, he would have thought that it was a waste of time to watch women comb their hair. But today, when he saw Qin Yining's long black hair being combed into a woman's hairstyle with the skillful hands of a maidservant, Pang Xiao felt more satisfied than if he had won the world. "Sister Yi, help me comb my hair later." Pang Xiao smiled and came over. He rubbed his cheek against Qin Yining's hair. The servant girls all retreated to the outer room with red faces. Qin Yining smiled and said, "I'm not good at combing hair." Chapter 419. Qin Yining was so amused that she couldn't help but smile. She said playfully, "That won't do. If your hair isn't combed properly, people will at most say that Wang Yi is a straightforward person who doesn't care about such details. But if my eyebrows are crooked, I'll become a laughingstock. Won't I embarrass you then?" "Embarrass you? I can't wait to hide you away and not let anyone see you." His large hand wrapped around her slender waist and gently caressed her. He whispered in her ear, "You didn't see how those people stared at you yesterday. I can't wait to gouge their eyes out." Qin Yining said angrily, "Look at you. You want to lock me up and gouge their eyes out. I'm scared just listening to you." She pretended to be scared. Pang Xiao couldn't help but laugh when he saw how cute she was. "Sister Yi, why are you so cute?" After planting a loud kiss on her cheek, Pang Xiao picked up a brush and began to carefully draw her eyebrows. This hand, which was capable of wielding a saber to kill the enemy in battle, was now carefully drawing her eyebrows. Unexpectedly, the color of her eyebrows was just right, and it was very beautiful. Pang Xiao's eyebrows were very beautiful. Qin Yining looked at herself in the mirror and said with a smile, "Your skills are not bad. If you don't want to be Wang Yi in the future, you can also specialize in drawing other people's eyebrows." She turned around and touched Pang Xiao's chin. "With such a handsome face, if you're willing to draw other people's eyebrows, won't all the young ladies and young wives fight for you?" "Hey, you naughty girl. You're actually teasing me." Pang Xiao laughed and tickled Qin Yining. Qin Yining's waist was the most untouchable part. As soon as Pang Xiao's large hand touched her, she couldn't help but laugh. She laughed and dodged. "Stop fooling around. I just combed my hair." However, Pang Xiao did not give up. He carried her onto the step bed. Not only did he put his hands on her, but he also kept blowing hot air on her neck and earlobe. Qin Yining laughed so hard that he was out of breath. He could neither push her away nor hide from her, so he could only beg for mercy while panting. Madame Ma's most capable servant, Granny Mi, came to Jinhua Yuan and saw the servant girls standing in the courtyard chatting. She could even faintly hear the laughter of women in the main room. Granny Mi couldn't help but laugh. "Mammy is here." Ji Yun bowed first. Xian Yun, Bing Tang, and Qiu Lu also bowed. Granny Mi smiled and said, "I came to see if Wang Yi and Princess Consort have gotten up yet." Bing Tang said with a smile, "Nanny, Wang Yi and the Princess Consort got up early and just got dressed. They are waiting to greet Old Master, Old Madam and Madam Dowager and serve tea." Bing Tang knew the rules of the big families, so he naturally said what was good for Qin Yining. Granny Mi smiled and said, "Then I will wait here for a moment. I will go back to greet Wang Yi and Princess Consort." Bing Tang bowed cleverly and turned to walk to the main room. As soon as Granny Mi spoke outside, Pang Xiao had already heard it. He also heard footsteps approaching, so he had to stop. He helped Qin Yining up and straightened the hairpin that was about to slip. Qin Yining laughed with tears in her eyes and her face flushed. Finally, she stopped laughing. She glared at him and took a comb to comb his hair. Bing Tang said at the door, "Wang Yi, Princess Consort, Granny Mi is here." Pang Xiao naturally knew that Granny Mi came to get the handkerchief, so he smiled and said, "Let her in." Qin Yining quickly combed Pang Xiao's hair. When Granny Mi came in, she didn't let go, so she smiled and nodded to greet her. "Hello, Granny." "Oh, Princess Consort, don't be like this. This old servant greets Princess Consort." Granny Mi saw that Qin Yining personally combed Pang Xiao's hair and heard the laughter in the room, so she was very happy. Qin Yining smiled and said, "You are an old servant of grandmother. Of course you deserve it." Granny Mi smiled and chatted with Qin Yining for a while. Then she wandered around the room. When she came to the bedside, she saw a small wooden box. She picked it up and put it in her sleeve. Qin Yining saw this and finally realized what it was. Her face turned red and she lowered her head, not knowing what to do. Granny Mi smiled and said, "This old servant will go back to Pine Crane Hall first." Pang Xiao smiled generously and said, "Granny Mi, take care." She watched as Granny Mi took the small box and left. Qin Yining coughed and said, "Let's hurry. Don't be too late and make mother, grandfather, and grandmother wait for a long time." "I'll listen to you." Pang Xiao stood and straightened his outer robe. He added, "In any case, we can continue to play when we get back." Qin Yining silently pinched his arm and then ordered the servant girls to bring the 3 pairs of shoes she had prepared. She and Pang Xiao walked together. They left Jinhua Yuan and walked to Pine Crane Hall. The two of them didn't walk very fast. Pang Xiao introduced the layout of the residence to Qin Yining along the way. "You lived here for a short time and it wasn't convenient for you to move around. Now that you've returned to cultivation after your wedding, I removed some of the people in the residence. It's relatively safer now. You can live here more comfortably." Qin Yining smiled and nodded. He asked, "Was your Majesty drunk yesterday? When did he leave?" "When I went out to propose a toast, your Majesty had already left in a hurry. My people said that your Majesty received a secret report and left in a hurry. When he left, he didn't look too good." Qin Yining was somewhat worried. "I hope it doesn't have anything to do with you. I'm still hoping that we can live a peaceful life for a while." Pang Xiao smiled and said, "Don't worry. It doesn't matter whether it has anything to do with me or not. Your man won't be bullied by anyone. I'll deal with whatever comes my way. I'll always have a way to deal with it. You just have to be at ease and enjoy life at home. You don't have to work as hard as you used to." Qin Yining felt shy and touched when he said "your man." She was always working hard for others. This was the first time that someone had promised her that she didn't have to work hard and that he would take care of everything. Qin Yining smiled and said, "Then I'll just continue to be lazy from now on." "You can't blame me. Why would I? If you're really willing to be lazy, I'll even reward you. How about it?" As the two chatted and laughed, they had already arrived at Pine Crane Hall. As soon as they entered the courtyard, Bai Dao hurriedly went into the room to report. The husband and wife led the servants into the main room, bypassing the newly installed big screen with the tip of the eyebrows, and came to the inner room. Yarrow Chungu, Madame Ma, and the Yarrow clan were all there. Everyone's faces were filled with joy. Nanny Mi instructed Kui Dao and Bai Dao to set up a beautiful cushion. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining knelt down side by side and bowed deeply. Okay, get up quickly. Lassie, get up quickly." Madame Ma was so happy that she could only show her teeth and not her eyes. She repeatedly asked Qin Yining to get up. Qin Yining smiled and knelt down in front of Yarrow Chungu and Madame Ma. Then, He took 2 cups of tea from Ji Yun's tray and offered them to the 2 elders respectively. Your granddaughter-in-law pays her respects to the 2 elders. Oh, good, good, good. Get up quickly. Yes, get up quickly. Be careful not to hurt your knees. The 2 elders placed the thick red envelopes on the tray. Qin Yining got up and handed over the 2 pairs of shoes that he had made. Your granddaughter-in-law's skills are rough. Please don't mind. Chapter 420. Qin Yining couldn't help but be moved. She knew that Madame Ma liked her, and she wasn't a picky old woman who valued the younger generation's feelings more than her craftsmanship. That was why she said that. However, she knew her own needlework very well. It wasn't exquisite, but it was solid. Mother, please have some tea. Qin Yining took the teacup and knelt in front of Yarrow clan to serve tea. Yarosha smiled as she received the teacup and took a sip. She also gave Qin Yining a large red envelope and an exquisite wooden box with flower carvings. Qin Yining smiled and bowed. Thank you, mother. She signaled for Bing Tang to accept the gifts and then offered the embroidered shoes she made for Yarrow clan with both hands. Yarrow clan took it with a smile. Thank you. Get up. Yes. Come sit with grandmother. Madame Ma affectionately took Qin Yining's hand and let her sit next to her. She found this granddaughter-in-law pleasing to the eye. Good child. I've been waiting for you for a long time, and you've finally married into my family. Now that you're here, Dai Fu will have someone to take care of you. We don't have many masters, but there are many servants. Your mother-in-law and I aren't good at managing these things, so we'll leave them all to you. I understand grandmother's good intentions, but I'm young and inexperienced. I'm afraid that I won't do a good job and embarrass the prince's household. Qin Yining didn't really know how to manage the household. She used to be the young mistress of the household in Dian. She was just afraid that she would take away her mother-in-law's power as soon as she married into the family. Yarrow clan smiled and said, "You're a smart child. You'll get used to managing the household as time goes by. If there's anything you're not sure about, you can ask me. I'll tell you a few times, and you'll get used to it. I'm old. Right now, I'm just looking forward to having a grandson. I don't care about anything else." Qin Yining's face turned red. She muttered, "Yes. If there's anything I don't understand, I'll ask mother." Yarrow clan smiled and nodded. "I'll ask Zhao Kuan to send the matching tiles to Jinhua Park later." Qin Yining thought for a moment and smiled. "Mother, I have a presumptuous request. Can you lend me Mama Zhao for a while? I don't need her to wait on me in the room. I'm young and my knowledge is limited. There are many things in the manor that I don't understand. With Mama Zhao around, it'll be easier to give me pointers. Also, if I need to pass on a message, Mama Zhao will have more weight." Yarosha heard this and could not help but look deeply at Qin Yining. Seeing that her eyes were focused and sincere, without any reluctance, he couldn't help but praise her secretly, says a smart girl. STTST take the initiative. Moreover, Zhao Kuan's family was respectable, so she could still use their influence to gain a foothold. TTS kill TTS STS kill SS killings. TS. They STSS, SS at night TSST. It Yarosha's heart was truly a little complicated. On one hand, they were happy for their son. Having such a smart wife was a great help to their son. At least, she knew what to do at the right time. On the other hand, they were worried. With such a smart person by their side, it'd be fine if they had a good relationship. But if there were disagreements, they might not win in a battle of wits. Pang Xiao became anxious when he saw Yarrow clan's silence. He'd heard that mother-in-law's and daughter-in-law's relationships weren't easy to get along with. He was afraid that if he acted too protective of Qin Yining in front of his mother, it'd make Qin Yining jealous. When he wasn't at home, Qin Yining would be the one in trouble. He could only stand and stare. He couldn't help but guess what the Yarrow clan was thinking. Marsha couldn't bear to see him procrastinate. She said, "Dai Fu's wife is talking to you. What are you thinking about? If Zhao Kuan's family is busy, I'll arrange for one of my capable men to go." "Mother, I think it's a good idea to arrange for Zhao Kuan's family to go. I'm just thinking that it's not enough to arrange for one person to help Dai Fu's wife. Later, I'll have to gather all the people in the residence and make arrangements. Qin Yining could vaguely guess Yarrow clan's thoughts. He just smiled and thanked them. But she wasn't disappointed. After all, strictly speaking, she wasn't familiar with Pang Xiao's family. Naturally, mother-in-law's and mother-in-law's feelings towards the younger generation were different. When she first returned home, her biological mother didn't treat her well. After getting along with her for a long time, weren't they so close that they couldn't bear to part with each other? Time reveals a person's heart. She wasn't scheming against Pang Xiao's family. She believed that the Yarrow clan would like her in the future. Seeing that they were almost done chatting, Pang Xiao said, "Mother, we still have to go to the palace today to thank His Majesty. We might not come back for lunch." When Yarrow clan heard the words enter the palace, they became nervous for Pang Xiao. Thinking of their son's identity, if Pang Xiao went to war in the future, the women in their family would be invited to the palace to stay for a while. It was a good thing to have such a smart daughter-in-law like Qin Yining. As a result, the Yarrow clan's gaze towards Qin Yining became gentler. "Hurry up and tidy up. You can go now. Don't let your Majesty blame you if you're late." "Yes." Qin Yining stood up and bowed to Yarrow Chenggu, Ma Shu, and the Yarrow clan. Then, he followed Pang Xiao out. As soon as the two left, Ma Shu's face fell. "Yiping, what did you mean just now? Mother, what are you talking about?" Pang Xiao looked at Ma Shu helplessly. "Lassie just came in and politely offered you tea and gave you the needlework she made. What kind of airs are you putting on? She's the apple of the eye at home. Does she have to be humble here?" "Mother, I didn't mean that. I can't wait to like her." "I think you do. Lassie asked you for advice and even borrowed Zhao Kuan's family's clothes. That's because she's sensible. She was afraid that as a mother-in-law, you wouldn't be able to put down your pride to plant someone in your son's room, so she took the initiative to invite someone over. You, on the other hand, are putting on airs. Who doesn't know what you're thinking? Are you afraid that your daughter-in-law will have something against you?" Yarrow clan's worries were exposed and they felt a little uncomfortable. "Mother, I'm not afraid of this. I'm just afraid that she won't be able to manage things properly. Come on, I gave birth to you. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? You're just afraid that your daughter-in-law is too smart and will be controlled by her in the future. If you two don't get along well, you're afraid that you won't be able to control her." Ma Shu's words exposed the Yarrow clan's thoughts. Yarrow Chenggu was smoking on the side, pretending that he couldn't hear the conversation between the mother and son. Yarrow clan said, "Mother, after all, you can't judge a book by its cover. It's not that I don't like her, nor do I want to make things difficult for her. I just have to be wary of others." "Wary of others?" Ma Shu sneered. "You're just scheming. You've worked in a wealthy family before and you've picked up those bad habits. Scheming against outsiders is because you're capable, but you even do that to your own family. Aren't you tired of living? What's wrong with that child? I think she's good. She's sensible and knows when to advance and when to retreat. Do you think you're very secretive about your thoughts? Even a straightforward mother like me can see through it. That lass is so smart, how can she not see through it? She just has self-restraint and doesn't say anything." Yarrow clan's face turned red after being criticized by Ma Shu, but they didn't feel that there was anything wrong with being wary. She only had her son to rely on, and her son was now very passionate. How could he control himself in front of such a beauty? She's his mother, so of course she has to keep an eye on him. Seeing that Yarrow clan was silent, Ma Shu sneered and said, "You don't have to be indignant. She's Yi Lass. Although she had a hard life when she was young and didn't enjoy a good life at home, her family used to be a big family in the Dian dynasty. Yi Lass has been taught by her father, so her character is naturally not bad. I heard from Dai Fu that Yi Lass was in charge of the inner chamber before she got married. If you're really afraid of being robbed of your power, I have to say something. In the future, everything will belong to the children. If you keep clenching your fists and refusing to let go, do you think you can take it away?" Marsha's words had already made Yarrow clan's face turn red, and they wished they could find a hole to hide in. It was reasonable, but emotionally, she just couldn't control herself. Seeing the Yarrow clan's reaction, Marsha shook her head and nodded. You people of the old Yarrow clan are all scheming. You think you're smart and can figure out the world, but you can't figure out people's hearts. Yarrow Changu saw that he was implicated and said helplessly, "What's wrong with me? You can teach your daughter a lesson, but don't involve me." Marsha looked at Yarrow Changu and didn't want to talk nonsense with this old man. She turned around and called Nanny Mi over. Go to Jinhua Court more often and send some nourishing soup and water to Sister Yi. By the way, see if anyone has angered her. If there is, come back and tell me. I'll teach her a lesson. Nanny Mi was amused. Old madam, you're not ordering me at all. You're educating your daughter. Marsha stared at Yarrow clan and snorted. Yarrow clan felt helpless and amused, thinking that maybe she was really wrong. She knew that her mother was a straightforward person, but she would never be wrong about people. Maybe she was thinking too much. Qin Yining and Pang Xiao got on the carriage and went to the palace. Sister Yi, are you angry? Pang Xiao held her hand and asked carefully. Qin Yining was very surprised. Why do you ask? Just now, my mother was like that. Are you angry? Of course not. Qin Yining laughed. My mother is very good to me. She just gave me a jade bracelet with excellent water source. I've just married into the family, so I'm not familiar with the elders. I'll be familiar with them later. Don't make wild guesses. It seems that my mother bullied me. Hearing this, Pang Xiao couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief secretly. Regardless of who was right and who was wrong in those disputes, the Yarrow clan gave birth to him. It was not easy for an unmarried woman to raise him. If his wife didn't get along with his mother, he would more or less feel regret in his heart. Of course, if his mother didn't like his wife, he would also feel regret. Fortunately, his sister Yi was generous, and his mother was not a foolish person. As Qin Yining said, after a long time, they might be familiar with each other. They chatted along the way and soon arrived at the palace gate. After changing to the oil wall carriage, they went directly to Yangshan Palace. Chapter 421. It's our fault for making Your Majesty and Empress Dowager wait for so long. We were delayed on the way. Pang Xiao smiled and saluted. Li Chitian affectionately put his arm around Pang Xiao's shoulder and patted him on the shoulder. He smiled ambiguously and said, I understand, I understand. We are all experienced people. Qin Yining lowered his head at the side. He didn't like Li Chitian pretending to be close to him, but he didn't dare to show the slightest dissatisfaction. He just blushed shyly. Pang Xiao and Li Chitian chatted for a while, then took a few steps back and saluted in advance. Seeing Qin Yining's rosy cheeks, Pang Xiao seemed to like something in his heart. He wished he could pull her into his arms and get close to her. However, his face was indifferent. He said in a deep voice, Why are you still standing there? Quickly come and thank Your Majesty. When Qin Yining heard Pang Xiao's words, he understood his intention. He lowered his head like a wronged wife and knelt down next to Pang Xiao. They kowtowed to Li Chitian to thank him. Li Chitian carefully observed the two. He saw that Pang Xiao was indifferent to Qin Yining and didn't show too much enthusiasm, so he felt a little better. If Pang Xiao had a father-in-law who had the ability to argue with scholars and a wife who was beautiful and intelligent, then he would have made a mistake. You may dispense with the formalities. If you and your wife can live happily in the future, then it won't be a waste of my painstaking efforts to arrange for you. This subject will remember Your Majesty's teachings. Pang Xiao saluted. Qin Yining also said woodenly, Thank you for Your Majesty's teachings. Li Chitian's mood improved a lot. He said, Quickly go and kowtow to the Empress Dowager. Zhishi will come back after kowtowing. We have something important to discuss with you. Let's have lunch together. Yes, thank you Your Majesty. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining bowed again and then slowly retreated. When they arrived at the courtyard, Qin Yining did not let down his guard. Who knew how many eyes were watching him from every corner of the palace? Pang Xiao strode behind the little eunuch. Qin Yining lowered his head and followed behind. He kept a certain distance from Pang Xiao. He didn't seem estranged, but there was a hint of fear in his eyes. Pang Xiao's heart was already bursting with joy. He was thinking about how to praise her intelligence when he returned home, but his face was cold all the time, which made the palace servants who passed by retreat. Not long after, the group arrived at Xi'an Palace. The eunuch went in to pass on the message. After a while, he came out and bowed. He said respectfully, "The Empress Dowager invites Wang Yi and Wang Fei in." "Thank you, eunuch." Pang Xiao smiled gently and tipped the eunuch a silver ingot. The eunuch was full of smiles and hurriedly bowed. "Thank you, Wang Yi." Xi'an Palace was the same as before. Pang Xiao went through the caltrop flower door and went straight to the side hall. Qin Yining followed closely behind. When he reached the door of the side hall, he heard the Empress Dowager greeting him warmly. "You're here. Where's your wife?" Greetings to the Empress Dowager. Qin Yining knelt down and bowed. The Empress Dowager kindly waved her hand. "Come, let me take a look." Qin Yining obediently stood up and stood in front of the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager carefully sized him up and said with a smile, "I haven't seen you for a few days. Family Qin's lass has become more beautiful. Last time, this Empress Dowager was still thinking about finding a good family for you. I want to find a good home for you young people, and now the fate of the two of you has arrived. It's really worth celebrating." Was the Empress Dowager trying to explain how she messed up the matchmaking last time? Qin Yining couldn't help but sneer inwardly. The Empress Dowager was treating everyone as fools. Last time, she was clearly trying to stir up trouble between Pang Xiao and the aristocratic families. What do you mean by let the young people have a good home? He sure knew how to flatter himself. "Thank you, Empress Dowager." Qin Yining shyly lowered his head and didn't want to talk to her. Pang Xiao smiled and asked, "How has the Empress Dowager been these days? Have you eaten the food box this subject had someone send in last time?" "I've eaten it. How could I not eat the food you sent in?" The Empress Dowager smiled and said, "It's rare for you to be so filial." Pang Xiao smiled and reminded the Empress Dowager to take care of herself. Then he stood up and said, replying to the Empress Dowager, "Your Majesty also ordered this subject to go to Yangshan Palace Hall. He said that he has an errand to give this subject instructions. This subject will not stay any longer." When the Empress Dowager heard this, she said reluctantly, "Ah, you children always have things to do. Forget it. Since it's an important errand, then go quickly. Leave your wife here to chat with me. When you're done, come to my palace for lunch." Pang Xiao smiled and said, "I was just about to disturb you." The Empress Dowager smiled and waved at Qin Yining. "Come and sit next to me. Let's have a good chat. Don't pay attention to these men. They only know how to be busy." Pang Xiao bowed to the Empress Dowager with a smile and retreated. Before he left, he glanced at Qin Yining worriedly. Although Pang Xiao was very confident in Qin Yining, he couldn't help but worry. A person might not want to hurt a tiger, but the tiger wanted to hurt a person's heart. Then he rejoiced. Fortunately, he fell in love with such an intelligent woman. If an ordinary young lady followed him, she probably wouldn't be able to cope with the endless unexpected situations. He couldn't be by her side all the time. If he didn't have the ability to protect himself, then what could he do? Fortunately, Qin Yining had experienced great storms. Pang Xiao shook his head and temporarily put aside his worries. He quickly went to Yangshan Palace Hall. The sooner he finished his errand, the sooner he could bring Qin Yining back to the Fu. Qin Yining only cared about accompanying the Empress Dowager and talking. She could even tolerate the old madam's temper. The Empress Dowager was a smart woman. Although they talked about family matters, she might not talk about anything profound. The Empress Dowager was very good at reading people's expressions and knew what to say to make them happy. On one hand, Qin Yining admired the Empress Dowager's ability to handle matters. On the other hand, he thought that perhaps Li Qitian had such a smooth and slick personality and could sit on the throne because of such a mother. However, It was really tiring to feign civility with such an unambitious person. Empress Dowager, Enyang Princess Royal is here. Just as the two were chatting happily, a palace servant came in from outside. Without waiting for the Empress Dowager to answer, Li Helan's voice came first. Muhu, I heard that you have a guest. Who is it that keeps daughter outside? Li Helan quickly walked in like a gust of wind. Her smile stiffened when she saw Qin Yining. Qin Yining pretended not to see Li Helan's expression. He stood up and respectfully bowed. This subject's wife greets Enyang Princess Royal. When Li Helan heard the words this subject's wife, it was like someone had poured hot oil on her. Her entire body was burning with anger. This was the Empress Dowager's palace, her Muhu's territory. There was no need to worry about anything else. Moreover, the Empress Dowager had always known about her matters. Li Helan sneered without any scruples. No need for formalities. This one can't accept your courtesy. When Qin Yining heard this, he was on guard. It seemed that Li Helan hadn't given up on Pang Xiao. Moreover, he didn't have any scruples in front of the Empress Dowager. Was he planning to embarrass her today? Eldest princess is too serious. You are a princess and this subject's wife is only the wife of an official. How could you not accept this subject's courtesy? If others knew, they would say that you belittled yourself. If someone with ulterior motives heard this and spread rumors outside, it would affect your prestige. Qin Yining gave a proper bow. Then he stood up with his hands by his side. The Empress Dowager looked at Qin Yining with some surprise. Although her words were not arrogant or rash and her tone was calm, there was no anger at all. However, the Empress Dowager could hear the fierceness in her words. She was afraid that with the eldest princess's temper, she would explode after hearing this. The Empress Dowager wanted to reconcile, but Li Helan sneered first. You must be very proud of being an official's wife, right? That's right, your father is only a surrendered official from a small country. He couldn't live anymore, so he became this one's imperial brother's vassal. You are the daughter of a surrendered official. If you don't become an official's wife, how will you live? Moreover, you have already been. Li Helan covered her mouth and laughed. The ridicule in her words was very obvious. Qin Yining secretly mocked Li Helan's stupidity. She wanted to show off her power and embarrass her. There were thousands of ways to do it. However, she chose the most inappropriate one. She only thought that the Empress Dowager was her birth mother and would support her. But she never thought that she was brought here by Pang Xiao. If the Empress Dowager didn't want to completely offend Pang Xiao, she naturally wouldn't allow Li Helan to go overboard. Therefore, even if Qin Yining didn't do anything, the Empress Dowager would still stand up for her. Lana, don't speak nonsense. The Empress Dowager opened her mouth and looked at Li Helan with a warning look. Li Helan's laughter suddenly stopped and she looked at the Empress Dowager in disbelief. The Empress Dowager said, "The good wine your imperial brother gave you is for you and the prince consort to eat together, not for you to eat alone. Girl, you're greedy for wine." After eating a few more mouthfuls of wine, you began to speak without restraint. Fortunately, Prince Zhongxian's consort is not an outsider. Otherwise, Ijia would like to see what you would do. Li Helan looked at the Empress Dowager's serious face and knew that she shouldn't lose control of her emotions like this. After all, she was no longer in a position to be jealous of Qin Yining. But who would know how wronged and unjust she was feeling in her heart? Imperial Mother has said it. Daughter will listen next time. Li Helan reluctantly admitted defeat. When Qin Yining saw this, he laughed inwardly and was about to suffer internal injuries. However, his expression was very serious as he said, "I didn't think that eldest princess would like to drink. I have a jar of good Nu Hong. I'll have someone send it to the princess residence later." Li Helan didn't want any Nu Hong at all. However, when she met the Empress Dowager's warning gaze, she still smiled insincerely and said, "Then I'll have to thank you. Eldest princess doesn't need to be so polite." Wang Yi told this subject that in the past, the Empress Dowager treated him like her own son and took good care of him in every possible way. Wang Yi has always been grateful. Now that this subject has married into the family, although I don't have much talent, I can understand Wang Yi's feelings. This is something I can do. This consort advises you to live peacefully and stop before going too far. Don't show off in front of this consort. Li Helan gritted her teeth and almost slapped Qin Yining. Chapter 422. Li Helan gritted her teeth so hard that they almost broke. She still said that she didn't have anything to show off. To be able to become Pang Xiao's wife, to be able to have this man, this was already the greatest capital. Qin Yining, that bitch, must have done it on purpose. She clearly knew that she wholeheartedly wanted to marry Pang Xiao. Now that she had gotten her wish, she found a way to ridicule her. Li Helan had been doted on since she was a child. There was never anything that she couldn't get when she wanted it. She had received too much in this life and was already used to having it. She was used to being doted on by her mother and brother. But in this life, even if she had thousands of Ruyi, just the fact that she wasn't Ruyi in marriage was enough to make her cry in the middle of the night. Although Prince Consort Ji was handsome, he was too cold to people. Interacting with Prince Consort Ji was like facing an ice sculpture, a wooden person. After they got married, he only fulfilled his duties as the prince consort on the wedding night. After that, he was respectful, polite, and distant to her. Especially after he found out that she went to Madame Lu's place to get along with the Prime Minister, he didn't even look at her. Li Helan heard that Prince Consort Ji even dressed up to attend Pang Zhishi's wedding. He even brought the entire Fu's soldiers to help out. He treated his friends better than he treated himself. What was the use of having this kind of marriage? This kind of prince consort would only add to her troubles. She couldn't get the man she wanted. Even if she married an outstanding man, she wouldn't be able to get him. Li Helan had been suppressed for a long time and was about to explode. Now, looking at the beautiful Qin Yining with her hair combed and hearing her talk about her intimacy with Pang Xiao, how could she stand it? Li Helan's anger burned more and more. She had already forgotten what the Empress Dowager had just said. Bitch! You're courting death. Li Helan reached out to grab Qin Yining's neck. Qin Yining was so scared that he quickly dodged. She didn't expect that Li Helan would dare to attack her in front of her. Perhaps he thought that since this was the Empress Dowager's palace, even if something happened, the Empress Dowager would back him up. Qin Yining's brain spun quickly. Facing a woman who always coveted her husband, she tolerated her again and again. Wasn't she too easy to manipulate? Quick, stop her. The eldest princess is drunk, don't let her hurt anyone. The Empress Dowager was frightened by Li Helan's appearance. She was stunned for a while before she remembered to give orders. However, at this moment, Qin Yining was being chased by Li Helan and accidentally stepped on her skirt, causing her to fall backwards. The floor was covered with a thick carpet, so it didn't hurt when she fell. However, behind her was a square table and 4 embroidered stools. It was a good thing that Qin Yining was lucky and didn't fall on the embroidered stools or the square table. However, there was a thump when she fell and she cried out in pain. Li Helan couldn't stop in time and was tripped by Qin Yining's leg. With a scream, she fell forward and fell on the embroidered stools. Her elbow hit the edge of the square table and she also fell to the ground. Qin Yining was lying on the ground crying out in pain. Li Helan was in so much pain that she couldn't say a single word. Her elbow was in so much pain that she couldn't even bend it. Her knee was in so much pain that she couldn't stand it. Seeing Qin Yining right beside her, Li Helan couldn't take it anymore and charged forward. You bitch, I'll let you show off. I didn't want the Pang Zhishi and gave it to you. What do you have to show off? Poisonous bitch. Cheap wench. If Qin Yining was serious about making a move against Li Helan would have already fainted. But she had made up her mind not to make a move today and didn't fight back. She was acting like a weak woman being bullied by the eldest princess. The maids and mamas in the Empress Dowager's palace were all stunned by the eldest princess acting like a shrew. Everyone was secretly criticizing her in their hearts. As the eldest princess, Li Helan was secretly in love with a man and couldn't get him, so her love turned to hate. She could even act so arrogantly in front of his official wife. This was truly shocking. Everyone pulled Li Helan away and looked at Qin Yining, who had fallen to the ground with her hair tied up. They all felt pity for her. "Don't pull me. All of you let go," Li Helan roared out. The Empress Dowager walked forward and leaned over to grab Li Helan's chin. She leaned in and said in a deep voice, "Wake up. This is my Xi'an palace. This is not the princess palace where you can act like a drunkard." Li Helan's chest was violently heaving up and down. Her arms and legs were filled with pain, but she could not suppress the anger in her heart. "Mother Empress, even you don't love Lan Er anymore. You always tell me to be obedient, to be obedient. All right, I'll listen, but the result? The result is that I will never be able to obtain the thing I like. My everything will be controlled. I can't even obtain the man I like. What kind of princess am I?" "You shut up. This widow can see that you've eaten some horse piss and you're speaking nonsense. You like husband Ji and your royal brother has already given you a marriage, so what are you still not satisfied with? You drank some wine today and went crazy, even mistaking the Prince Zhengxuan's wife for a maid. This widow has been too lenient on you. That's why you've become like this." Qin Yining was lying on the ground. She could clearly see the expressions between the Empress Dowager and Li Helan. The Empress Dowager kept signaling to Li Helan with her eyes, looking like she was anxious about something. However, Li Helan did not know how to appreciate it and continued to cause trouble. Today was already a big matter, so it was better to make it bigger. She had to add fuel to the fire. Qin Yining held her forehead and her face was covered in tears as she sobbed, "Eldest princess, what are you doing? How did this minister's wife offend you? You actually want to strangle this minister's wife to death. This minister's wife's husband is a loyal and conscientious minister to your majesty. Although this minister's wife is the daughter of a surrendered minister, my father is also your majesty's right-hand man. Eldest princess's actions, could it be that this minister's wife's family is idle? Could it be that we were wrong to seek refuge with the wise ruler?" The Empress Dowager fiercely glared at Qin Yining. This woman did not have good intentions. Her words seemed to be defending her, but every word was clearly provoking Li Helan and provoking her to do something even more excessive. The Empress Dowager ordered in a deep voice, "Why aren't you helping the Prince Zhengxuan up? Are you all dead?" "Yes." The palace servants came back to their senses after being yelled at by the Empress Dowager. They hurriedly went to help Qin Yining up. However, Qin Yining's face was pale as she held her head. Her body was limp as she leaned against the arm of a palace servant next to her. She looked so weak that she had no one to rely on. Li Helan became more and more irritable as she watched. Her hands were held by the nanny as she sat on the ground and kicked Qin Yining's legs. "I'll let you show off. I'll let you take advantage of me and pretend to be obedient. How could Brother Xiao like a slut like you? Why aren't you dead? Shut up. Why aren't you taking the eldest princess away?" When the Empress Dowager heard Li Helan's outrageous scolding, she was angry and anxious. Her face became even uglier. What kind of daughter did she raise? Because of a man, she was provoked by a poisonous woman and became like this. If this continued, it would alarm others and it wouldn't be a joke. Don't look at her status as the Empress Dowager. In the end, she was a mother because of her son. If it wasn't for Li Qitian's care, the Empress Dowager knew that her good days would come to an end. The palace servants went to help Li Helan and the Empress Dowager turned to help Qin Yining. "Is the princess all right? Quickly get up. The ground is cold." Qin Yining sneered in her heart. Was the Empress Dowager trying to turn a big matter into a small one and a small matter into nothing? Although a large part of what happened today was due to her scheme, the most important reason why Li Helan had been instigated was because she was unwilling to give up. She coveted Pang Xiao and was jealous of her, who had already become a Wang Fei. Since a person's heart had already borne the fruit of malice, then everything she saw was malice. She was tricked because of herself, so there was no need to be lenient. But even though Li Helan was like this, the Empress Dowager didn't have any intention of educating her and was even deliberately favoring her. Did she really think that she was a soft persimmon that would be bullied by the Empress Dowager in Xi'an Palace? Qin Yining looked at the Empress Dowager with unfocused eyes and said with a smile, replying to the Empress Dowager, "This minister's wife is fine." The Empress Dowager's heart calmed down a bit. She secretly thought that Qin Yining was quite sensible. Just as she ordered people to help Qin Yining up, she saw her body sway. Her eyes rolled back and her face turned pale as she fell backwards. The Empress Dowager was shocked by Qin Yining's actions. She had clearly seen that Qin Yining had fallen while being chased, but she hadn't hit the table or chair. But her current fainted appearance didn't seem fake at all. The Empress Dowager was truly anxious at this time. If something happened to Qin Yining, there was no need to say what Pang Xiao would do. Li Chitian was currently using Pang Xiao and Qin Huayuan as an important position. In the end, their newlywed wife and daughter had such an accident in Xi'an Palace and were even bullied by the eldest princess. If this spread out, how would the eldest princess live in the future? How would she, the Empress Dowager, live in the future? How would she face Li Chitian? Quickly call the imperial physician. The Empress Dowager didn't have time to care about Li Helan and ordered people, quickly carry the princess to the bed. Empress Dowager. An old mama said after some consideration, "We don't know why the princess fainted, so it's best not to move her." What if she was too frightened? Because if her heart palpitates, moving her like this could easily kill her. The Empress Dowager was reminded and recovered. She quickly nodded and said, "You're right. Ijia was too anxious and neglected this." Then let the princess lie down and wait for the imperial physician to come. Yes. Hearing the conversation between the Empress Dowager and the palace maids and seeing Qin Yining lying down, Li Helan, whose hands were restrained, suddenly began to cry. She was like a child who had lost her way. "I don't care. Imperial Mother, you only know how to bully me. Why don't you think more about your daughter? How many benefits has this cheap woman given Imperial Mother? Don't you remember that I'm your daughter?" Before the Empress Dowager could refute her, there was a sudden sound of voices coming from outside. A chamberlain loudly announced, "Your Majesty has arrived. Prince Consort Ji has arrived. Prince Zhongxian has arrived." Li Helan's crying suddenly stopped. The Empress Dowager's face was also ashen. Pang Xiao and Ji Zhayu followed behind Li Chitian. Seeing Qin Yining lying on the ground, Pang Xiao was so scared that his hands turned cold. He anxiously said, "What happened? Wasn't he fine just now?" Chapter 423. Cause and Effect. In reality, the three of them had heard Li Helan's angry roar from outside the hall. Li Chitian pretended not to hear because his younger sister was so fickle and had been caught red-handed by the two parties. It was too embarrassing. Pang Xiao's attention was completely focused on Qin Yining, who had fainted on the ground. He was so frightened that his soul almost flew away. He had no time to care about anything else. Ji Zhayu looked deeply at Li Helan and then stood behind Li Chitian. He was unwilling to say another word, and his expression was unprecedentedly stiff. The Empress Dowager's hands were cold, but she still had a proper and noble smile on her face. She said, "It's like this. Enyang drank some wine and became drunk. He said some drunken things. Wang Fei fell because she wasn't paying attention. She might have knocked herself out. Ijia has already sent for the imperial physician." Pang Xiao's fists were tightly clenched behind his back. If he hadn't forced himself to calm down, he probably would have cursed out loud. His good wife had been healthy when she had just been sent over. She knew how to cooperate with him. He had just walked away for a short while and she had collapsed like this. Pang Xiao strode forward and half carried Qin Yining, letting her rest her head on his arm. He wanted to show concern, but he didn't dare to show it too obviously for fear of arousing more suspicion. Therefore, the onlookers saw Pang Xiao holding Qin Yining in his arms with a gloomy face. Everyone couldn't tell if he was worried about his wife or if he felt that his dignity had been violated. Li Helan had already calmed down by now. Because he was too angry just now, he had yelled and screamed so loudly that his head was still buzzing. But because she had calmed down and regained her rationality, she seemed to have caused a great disaster. Her words had been heard by Prince Consort Ji. Li Helan's heart was in a mess. He carefully glanced at Ji Ziyu and realized that Ji Ziyu was still as cold as usual. It was as if even if the sky were to fall, he would still have the same expression. Li Helan felt his heart turn cold. During this period of time, she had ordered people to deliver food boxes, clothes, and embroidery to Ji Ziyu. She was afraid that all her efforts to please him had gone to waste. She didn't know if Ji Ziyu had heard her just now. If she heard it, she might not have the chance to win this man's heart in this lifetime. How could men like Ji Ziyu and Pang Xiao, who were brave men who killed enemies on the battlefield, tolerate their wives constantly thinking about someone else and making such a big fuss? This was equivalent to slapping Ji Ziyu's mouth, and it was done in front of an outsider. The reason why Ji Ziyu remained silent was because she was the eldest princess and he was the prince consort of Princess Shang. If it wasn't for this identity, she would have received a divorce letter a long time ago. Li Helan looked at Ji Ziyu's handsome face and then looked at Pang Xiao, who was squatting on the ground and hugging Qin Yining without saying a word. For a moment, she felt like the chicken had flown away and the eggs had been broken. The imperial physician is here. Just as everyone's mind was racing, the imperial physician had already been dragged in by the eunuchs. When he saw that Your Majesty and the two gods of war were here, the imperial physician was so frightened that he knelt down with a plop. This old official, no need for formalities. Quickly take a look at the princess consort. Yes. Hearing the urgency in Li Qitian's voice, the imperial physician didn't dare to delay and hurried to Qin Yining's side to treat him. On the way here, the eunuch who invited him had already hinted at the Empress Dowager's intentions. The imperial physician originally wanted to follow the Empress Dowager's instructions. But who would have thought that the two former commanders-in-chief of the country's two armies, the fiendish Wang Yi and the prince consort, would stare at him so fixedly? Even Your Majesty was eyeing him covetously from the side. For a moment, the imperial physician didn't know how to respond. If he listened to the Empress Dowager, he might offend others. If he didn't listen, he might not offend others, but he would offend the Empress Dowager. This matter, no matter what he did, it would be wrong. Seeing the sweat on the imperial physician's forehead, Pang Xiao gritted his teeth in worry and asked in a low voice, "How is she?" The imperial physician's heart skipped a beat and he blurted out, "The princess consort's body is fine." Perhaps she was agitated and suddenly fainted. This, after speaking a few times, he remembered the Empress Dowager's instructions and his face paled in shock. Pang Xiao asked, "What agitation?" It's emotions." The imperial physician didn't dare to look into the Empress Dowager's eyes and stammered, "Extreme anger, extreme sadness, extreme joy, all of these can cause emotional fluctuations. It's not strange that she fainted because of this." He had already told the truth and he couldn't change it now. The imperial physician could only bite the bullet and tell the truth. So that's how it is. Pang Xiao turned to look at the Empress Dowager and Li Helan. "It seems that my humble wife didn't faint because of a collision. Since there isn't anything serious, this subject will take her back." The last sentence was directed at Li Qitian. Li Qitian was so angry that his face was ashen. But he had no reason to refuse Pang Xiao's request. He didn't have anyone in the cabinet. The only person who could speak for him was Pang Xiao. At this point, he still wanted to rope in Pang Xiao to do great things. He didn't expect that the two troublemakers in the inner palace would lie through their teeth and offend him. Since there isn't anything serious, it's good to take her back to the Fu to recuperate. Li Qitian nodded in concern. Pang Xiao picked up Qin Yining. He suddenly thought of something and looked down to ask the nervous imperial physician. "This imperial physician, since you have seen my humble wife's pulse, I will have to trouble you to take care of my humble wife's pulse in the future." The words caused the imperial physician's anxious heart to fall back to its original place. Because Pang Xiao wanted him to take care of Wang Fei's pulse, even if the Empress Dowager was angry, she wouldn't dare to harm his life. The imperial physician understood that Pang Xiao was protecting him because he had spoken the truth and was afraid that he would be affected. The imperial physician hurriedly bowed and said, "Yes, this old one will do his best." Pang Xiao nodded and then looked at the Empress Dowager and the tear-stained Li Helan. This king really wants to know why a person who was fine when he was brought into the palace this morning suddenly fainted when he was talking with the Empress Dowager and Enyang Princess Royal in Xi'an Palace. Also, what did Enyang Princess Royal say that she went crazy after eating too much? In his anger, Pang Xiao's dark tone made people feel like they were suffocating. Even Li Chitian, as the emperor, felt a wave of pressure that was hard to conceal. The Empress Dowager and Princess Royal were two women and didn't dare to meet Pang Xiao's murderous gaze. In order to ease the awkward atmosphere, Li Chitian ordered people to prepare carriages and horses. He also ordered the imperial physician to treat Qin Yining. The imperial physician acknowledged and then followed Pang Xiao, who was carrying Qin Yining out of Xi'an Palace. When Pang Xiao's figure was far away, only the Empress Dowager, Li Helan, Ji Ziyu, and Li Chitian were left in Xi'an Palace. Li Chitian finally angrily flipped over the table. Cups, plates, and teacups fell to the ground and the broken porcelain let out a sharp scream, making people even more irritated. What's going on? Didn't we say that Pang Zhishi is one of our trusted officials and we still want to use him? Why are you bullying his wife? What are you thinking? Are you deliberately dragging us down and making us look bad? Imperial brother, you misunderstood. It's true that Lana drank a bit of wine and couldn't control her emotions. That Qin clan member was still randomly showing off in front of Lan Er. Even if she fainted from anger, that's her own business. You still dare to quibble? Li Chitian angrily snorted. Do you think everyone is blind and stupid? You're insulting two of our trusted officials. What do you want us to do? We value Jilan and want to become a family member, so we chose him to be your son-in-law. What's wrong with Jilan? Chem. With his military exploits that shook the Tartar Empire, his outstanding ability and appearance, how is he not a good match for you? Speak. Li Chitian had always doted on Li Helan and rarely lost his temper at him, especially now that there were other people present. Li Helan was shocked by Li Chitian's question. His lips trembled as he fearfully said, "No, imperial brother, you misunderstood. The son-in-law also misunderstood. I didn't mean that." That's right, Enyang is indeed not that kind of girl. Emperor, you're Anyang's brother and practically watched her grow up. Don't you know what kind of person she is? The Empress Dowager hastily tried to smooth things over. Li Chitian was so angry that he was about to explode. At this time, he didn't care that the Empress Dowager was his mother and immediately said, "If it weren't for you spoiling her, would she have become like this? You can't have her, so you begin to be cynical and feel that everyone in the world owes you. You can't share my burdens and you're causing trouble everywhere. What use do we have for a younger sister like you? Your Majesty." The Empress Dowager heard this and her face turned green. Could it be that Li Chitian wanted to kill Li Helan? The Empress Dowager pulled Li Chitian's hand. "Your Majesty, don't be impulsive. Lan Er is your younger sister." "Yes, she is our younger sister, but what did she help us with? She can't do anything well, and she's causing trouble everywhere." Li Chitian walked in front of Li Helan and pointed at her nose as he scolded, "I chose a husband for you, but you don't live your life well. Instead, you talk nonsense and even have the courage to fight with the wife of an official of the court. It's not for anything else, but to fight for her husband. Do you not have any face if this is spread out? If you don't have any face, we'll lose face for you." "Royal brother." Li Helan looked at Li Chitian in disbelief and sobbed, "Royal brother, how can you say this to Lan Er? Did we say something wrong? Whether we're right or not, you know best in your heart. From now on, you'll scram back to the eldest princess's palace and reflect on your mistakes behind closed doors. Every day, you'll copy the woman's precepts until we're satisfied before you come out. If you perform well and regain your previous understanding, we'll let you out. Otherwise, you'll have to copy the woman's precepts for the rest of your life. Do you hear me?" Li Helan felt like she had been struck by lightning and her body swayed. But Ji Ziyu looked down like he didn't see anything. Even if Li Helan was by his side, he wouldn't reach out to help her. "Royal brother, Lana doesn't want it. Lana doesn't want it. Don't want it. You want to go against the decree? Li Chitian asked with a calm face. Li Helan began to tremble in fear. Chapter 424. Li Helan stood there in a daze, as if all the strength in his body had been sucked out in an instant. His body swayed and finally, he couldn't help but fall to the ground. She raised her head and looked at Li Chitian with tears in her eyes. Finally, she said in a dry voice, "Chenmai obeys." Li Chitian coldly snorted, "If you had known what Chenmai means earlier, and what obeys means, things wouldn't have developed to this point. Think about it carefully. Someone come." Li Guanwen bowed his head and stepped forward to salute. "This servant is here, right? Send Enyang Princess Royal back to the Princess Royal residence. Arrange for 2 of Zhen's nannies to serve the Princess Royal. In addition, arrange for 20 guards to be in groups of 10 to protect the Princess Royal." This meant that they were going to keep Li Helan under surveillance like a criminal. Li Guanwen saluted and gave a meaningful glance to the palace servants. The palace servants immediately came to help Li Helan get up and leave. The Empress Dowager's heart ached and her eyebrows jumped. "Emperor, aren't you going too far by doing this?" Li Chitian heard this and narrowed his eyes dangerously. "Imperial Mother, although Ersi Hen is your son, I was also the Emperor of Daju. Ersi Hen is so busy every day for the country. Pang Zhishi is your son's backbone. He just got married, and in the blink of an eye, something like this happened right under Zhen's nose. Shouldn't Zhen give him an explanation? You should give him an explanation, but you shouldn't treat your younger sister like this. So, Imperial Mother means that Zhen should blame the person who led Enyang astray, right?" Li Chitian was usually very gentle and filial to the Empress Dowager, so the Empress Dowager had almost forgotten her son's original temperament. Li Chitian's gloomy eyes looked over and the Empress Dowager's heart trembled. That dragged out "Is that so?" was like a knife stabbing into her flesh. That chill and fear made her shiver all over. Seeing the Empress Dowager like this, Li Chitian's anger was somewhat extinguished. He said, "The Empress Dowager is already in her prime. There are many things that shouldn't be overworked. Sun will order people to repair the Buddha Hall in Xi'an Palace for you. In the future, Empress Dowager will worship Bodhisattva more, recite scriptures, cultivate your body and mind, and also pray for longevity. Sun is now the ruler of the world. I will definitely use the world to provide for Empress Dowager. The premise is that you have to live for a long time. What do you think?" Empress Dowager widened her eyes in disbelief. What Li Chitian meant was for her to stay in the temple and recite Buddhist scriptures in the future, and not to come out and meddle in the affairs of the outside world. After putting Li Helan in solitary confinement, he came to put her under house arrest. Empress Dowager roared in her heart. She was his mother. If she had known that her son would one day become such an unfilial son, she would rather Li Chitian than be the emperor. However, the Empress Dowager still retained some rationality at this moment. What's more, Li Helan was indeed in the wrong today. Li Helan's behavior of eating from the pot and looking at the basin was indeed fickle. The most embarrassing thing was that she was caught by the prince consort in front of her. It was the father's fault for not teaching her well. The eldest princess had a problem with her character, so it was naturally the Empress Dowager's fault for not teaching her well. The Empress Dowager was worried about her future, but she also had to worry about the relationship between Li Helan and Ji Ziyu. However, the emperor was in a rage, so the Empress Dowager did not dare to persuade Ji Ziyu. She could only say with a calm face, "The emperor is right. That's good. Imperial Mother can enjoy life in Xi'an Palace." After Li Chitian said this, he took a deep look at the palace servants kneeling in the palace. "Take these people one by one and ask them about today's matter." After giving the order, he turned and left, not even giving the Empress Dowager a chance to plead. The Empress Dowager looked at Li Chitian's back and tears fell down like a broken string of beads. What kind of sin did she commit? Percent Pang Xiao carried Qin Yining all the way out of Xi'an Palace. The little eunuch had already prepared a carriage for them. He carried her onto the carriage and sat in it himself. Pang Xiao ordered the little eunuch, "Prepare a stretcher for this imperial physician." The eunuch immediately prepared it. The group of people quickly walked out of the palace. Qin Yining lay in the swaying carriage. She felt Pang Xiao grabbing her left hand the whole time. His fingers were constantly exerting force. He should be extremely worried. She thought that although this was the palace and it was inconvenient to talk in the carriage, she could still give him some hints. Qin Yining held Pang Xiao's hand back and squeezed it hard. She then used her fingers to scratch his palm. Pang Xiao's eyes suddenly widened. His brain, which had stopped working because of her fainting, finally started working again. There must be a reason why Qin Yining pretended to faint. In any case, she wasn't really sick or injured. Although he was so scared that his heart almost jumped out of his chest and he didn't feel good, as long as she was fine, it was fine. Pang Xiao gently rubbed her eyes with his fingers, indicating that she could open her eyes. Qin Yining wasn't sure if anyone would discover that she was still jumping around. She only dared to open her eyes after receiving Pang Xiao's signal. She looked around with her big eyes and finally fixed her gaze on Pang Xiao's handsome face. She couldn't help but reveal a big smile. The ice and snow melted and the spring river was warm. Pang Xiao felt that his mood, which had been cloudy just a moment ago, was now clear and boundless. As long as he saw her smiling face, he couldn't help but smile. His large hand gently pinched the tip of her nose and said silently, "Little rascal." Qin Yining blinked her long eyelashes and smiled as she rubbed her cheek against his leg. At this moment, the carriage slowly stopped. Qin Yining immediately closed her eyes and continued to pretend to faint. "Wang Yi, we've arrived at the palace gates." "Yes." Pang Xiao got out of the carriage with Qin Yining in his arms and changed into the carriage of the Wang mansion. Huzi, Bing Tang and others saw that Qin Yining was carried here with an imperial physician by her side. They knew that something must have happened in the palace and were scared out of their wits. The carriage rushed all the way back to the Wang mansion. Pang Xiao directly ordered someone to drive the carriage to the second gate and carried Qin Yining all the way back to Jinhua Garden. He put her on the bed and let the imperial physician treat her. After the imperial physician saw Qin Yining, he found that she was fine except for anemia and weakness. He repeated the conclusion just now and then went to prescribe medicine. When there were no outsiders in the room, Pang Xiao whispered to Huzi, "Go and tell old master, Madam Dowager and Madam Dowager that there is nothing wrong here. We'll talk about the rest later when we meet them." Huzi caught the word "we" and immediately understood. He hurriedly rushed to pass the message. He knew how much Madam Dowager liked the princess. If she knew that the princess fell ill in Xi'an Palace, she would directly kill her way into the palace to find an explanation. The imperial physician's surname was Liu. After the diagnosis and treatment, Pang Xiao sent him out. "Don't worry, Imperial Physician Liu. In the future, you can come here regularly to check the princess's pulse. She will be fine." Imperial Physician Liu said gratefully, "I'm very grateful for Wang Yi's kindness." "You're welcome." Pang Xiao asked Xie Yu to send Imperial Physician Liu out. Xie Yu understood and naturally gave him a big red envelope. When Pang Xiao returned to the room, Qin Yining had already sat up with the quilt. She stretched her neck and looked outside. She lowered her voice and said, "Have the outsiders all left?" This sentence inexplicably touched the soft part of Pang Xiao's heart. He sat on the edge of the bed and hugged Qin Yining, saying, "They've all left." "What happened just now? Do you know that when I saw you lying on the ground unconscious, I was so scared that my soul almost flew away? If something happened to you because of my negligence, I don't want to live anymore. I'll just go with you." Qin Yining hugged Pang Xiao's neck and rubbed her cheek on his shoulder and neck. "Don't be afraid. It's really okay. It's just that I don't like Princess Royal of Anyang's face. She has always been sarcastic." After saying this, Qin Yining left Pang Xiao's embrace. She looked at him and said, "This matter was caused by you. Princess Royal of Anyang has deep feelings for you. Seeing us get married, she couldn't sit still. She just happened to see me today and naturally wanted to know about the matters between us. Her heart was filled with jealousy, so she wanted to mess with me." Qin Yining tapped Pang Xiao's cheek and said, "Tell me, did you bring this here?" Pang Xiao coughed and said, "I never brought her here. Back then, when she was still young, I only treated her as a little sister. Now, she is just a little sister who has grown up. Moreover, even her older brother is estranged from me. How could I have anything to do with her? I know there's nothing to do with you, but she scolded me very badly. Qin Yining told him everything that had happened in Xi'an Palace in detail. So you pretended to be unconscious because you wanted to use this matter to make Anyang completely leave. The one who knows me best is Wang Yi. Qin Yining said with a smile, even if there is nothing between you two, she is Prince Consort Ji's wife on one hand and also covets my husband on the other. Do you think I will let her off so easily? This kind of personality is really a loss to the imperial family's style. You're right. Pang Xiao knew that he was in the wrong and didn't dare to make a move. He only chatted with Qin Yining. Qin Yining received encouragement and propped himself up, saying, right now, my only hope is that Prince Consort Ji won't feel too bad about what Li Helan has done. Hearing this, Pang Xiao felt a wave of sadness in his heart. He was his good brother, so he naturally understood his personality. She had the ability, the looks, and the martial arts. She was also the commander of the Dragon Legion. How was she not worthy of Li Helan? She was such a wanton woman. Pang Xiao felt that letting Li Helan get close to Ji Zheyu even once was an insult to Ji Zheyu. However, what made Pang Xiao the most sad was that Your Majesty's preference for Ji Zheyu was becoming more and more obvious. Ji Zheyu was becoming more and more helpless around Your Majesty. His wife had such a noble status, but he couldn't say anything even if he did something wrong. Pang Xiao thought about it carefully and felt sad for his good brother. Qin Yining got off the ground and said, I want to go and pay my respects to my mother and grandmother. I'm afraid that the commotion just now was too big and scared them. I've already made the arrangements and asked someone to pass on the message. You don't have to worry about this. Qin Yining smiled and said, others will say it. It's filial for us to say it ourselves. Seeing her like this, Pang Xiao could only listen to her. Chapter 425. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining's complexions turned grave when they heard the words Earth Dragon overturning body. 30 years ago, there was a major earthquake in BG. At that time, more than 500,000 people in the two prefectures were homeless. In addition, the summer weather was hot and rainy, so the corpses buried in the ruins became infected in the hot and humid environment. There was also a lot of ruins that couldn't be cleaned up in time. In the end, it led to a major epidemic. That loss greatly damaged BG's vitality. It took a long time for everything to settle down, and the already empty state treasury became even more empty. Pang Xiao asked anxiously, is there any report on the situation of the earthquake? Huzi shook his head and said, we don't have the exact statistics yet. But, starting from the old capital of Great Yang in the south, all the way to the north, 3 cities have been affected by the tremors. The tremors in the old capital have not stopped for 2 days. 3 cities. Isn't Tai City included? Qin Yining frowned. Tai City was where she grew up, and she still missed it. Huzi nodded. It should be included. However, Tai City is still far from the old capital of the Yang dynasty, so it shouldn't be a big problem. Qin Yining and Pang Xiao looked at each other and saw the worry in each other's eyes. The chaos of war had just ended, and such a major disaster had occurred. The Great Zhou dynasty, which appeared glamorous on the surface, actually had an empty treasury. His Majesty's internal funds had basically been used up, so what could he use to provide disaster relief? How could they spare the energy to deal with the aftermath of the disaster? It was true that Pang Xiao was on guard against Li Qitian's trap. However, Pang Xiao was most worried about the safety of the people. Dian is really plagued with disasters. Huzi couldn't help but sigh. I thought that everything would gradually get better, but I didn't expect the earthquake to happen again. Qin Yining couldn't help but sigh. Natural disasters and man-made disasters are the people who suffer. Pang Xiao also frowned worriedly. He could not help but think about how to deal with this matter. The two of them did not want to bring their emotions to the old man. Therefore, when he arrived at the Pine Crane Hall, he acted as usual. As soon as Qin Yining entered the door, Madame Ma came out to greet her. She took her hand and sized her up before letting out a long sigh and saying, "They said that it was Dai Fu who carried you back. When I heard it, I was scared out of my wits. Huzi also said that you were fine, but when I asked him, he couldn't say anything. Fortunately, you are fine. Did something happen in the palace? Why did you faint all of a sudden?" Qin Yining glanced at Pang Xiao. Seeing that he seemed somewhat uncomfortable, Qin Yining didn't mention Li Helan's matter. He only said, "It's nothing serious. He's just a little anemic." Plus, he was nervous when replying to the Empress Dowager, so he fainted. The imperial physician had examined her and said that she was fine. She'll be fine after a period of recuperation. The Yarrow clan and Yarrow Chungu were very suspicious. Just now, they had been sizing up Qin Yining. When they saw her glance at Pang Xiao and then say this, they were certain that she was not telling the truth. Yarrow Chungu thought that perhaps the situation outside was not good. Qin Yining did not want her elders to be frightened. The Yarrow clan was suspicious. They felt that Qin Yining looked a little guilty. Madame Ma held Qin Yining's hand worriedly and said, "Look at your cold hands. Anemia is not a small matter. You are still young. What will happen when you get older? Fortunately, we discovered it early. You can start recuperating now. You'll be fine after a period of recuperation." "Yes, thank you, grandmother." Qin Yining looked at Madame Ma gratefully. She held her hand and shook it. Qin Yining had never received the care of her elders since she was young. Needless to say, the old dowager was no exception. In the past, when they were in Dian, her grandmother, Madame of Dingguo, had a relationship with her. Although there was true love between them, there was also a conflict of interest. When she first returned to the Fu and did not receive her mother's love, her grandmother advised her mother to treat her better. However, it was not because her grandmother liked her, but because her grandmother wanted to find a way to stabilize her mother's position. Madame Ma was one of those people who treated her well for no reason. Qin Yining was very sensitive to people's malice and hostility. She was also very sensitive to people's kindness. At that time, it was not confirmed that she would marry Pang Xiao, but Madame Ma already felt like an old friend to her at first sight. "Silly child, your family. There's no need to thank me. You're also pitiful. You've been living with my Dai Fu at such a young age." Madame Ma took Qin Yining's hand and went to sit on the big Kang bed by the window. "If you have anything you want to eat in the future, just tell them and ask them to make it. If Dai Fu treats you badly or dares to bully you, just tell me. I'll help you beat him up." Pang Xiao couldn't help but feel amused when he saw how well his grandmother treated Qin Yining. He moved closer to Madame Ma and said shamelessly, "My status is getting lower and lower now. Grandmother only dotes on Sister Yi now. She doesn't dote on me anymore. Go away, you wild boy. You're so thick-skinned that you don't even know the pain of being pricked by a needle. Our girl Yi is delicate and soft. Of course I dote on her." Madame Ma smiled and pushed Pang Xiao's face away. Qin Yining burst into laughter when he heard this. Yarrow Chungu, who was smoking a cigarette at the side, was also amused. Only the Yarrow clan had a faint smile on their faces. Qin Yining chatted with Madame Ma for a while, then said with a smile, "Since it's still early, I plan to summon the servants to the front hall for a chat. Grandmother, what do you think?" Madame Ma nodded with a smile. Just as she was about to agree, Yarrow clan said, "There's no hurry. You're not feeling well, so you should rest well. Anyway, the matters in the mansion have already become a system. You can slowly get used to it. The most important thing is still your health. Your mother-in-law is right." Madame Ma agreed when she heard this. "I almost forgot after talking for a while. You should go back and rest. I'll ask them to send you some tonic soup later." Qin Yining nodded with a smile. He didn't take Yarrow clan's vague hostility to heart. He just nodded obediently and said, "Okay, then I'll take my leave first. Go back and rest well." Qin Yining stood up and bowed to Yarrow Chungu, Madame Ma, and the Yarrow clan. Pang Xiao looked deeply at the Yarrow clan. When the Yarrow clan and Yarrow Chungu looked at her at the same time, She suddenly smiled and said, "Grandfather, mother, actually, I don't want Sister Yi to be too tired. Why don't we just let Sister Yi manage Jinhua Park in the future? Since mother also can't stay idle, then we'll let mother manage the rest of the mansion. In the future, Jinhua Park will be separated from the rest of the mansion and do things on their own." Yarrow clan's expression changed when they heard this. "Daifu, what do you mean?" "It doesn't mean anything. It's just the literal meaning. Mother's body is healthy and strong. Managing the various courtyards of the mansion is also a pastime. Sister Yi is still young and weak. You should take care of Sister Yi and help your son." Pang Xiao smiled and turned around to instruct Zhao Kuan's family, "You don't need to listen to the princess consort's orders. In the future, you don't need to go to Jinhua Park. Just let the princess consort take charge of Jinhua Park." Zhao Kuan's family looked hesitantly at the Yarrow clan. Yarrow clan's face turned green and said, "Jinhua Park is also part of the mansion. It's against the rules to take the Jinhua Park alone. Mother, rules are made by people. Sister Yi may not have experience, but she's more than enough to manage Jinhua Park. This way, you don't need to use the people around mother." Mother also can't leave Zhao Kuan's family. Qin Yining frowned when he heard this. She knew that the Yarrow clan was somewhat guarded and hostile towards her, especially after she almost took over the affairs of the mansion. She could understand that the Yarrow clan didn't trust her and didn't want to give up power. She just thought that time would tell. She would let the Yarrow clan acknowledge her. If they didn't want power, then so be it. But she didn't expect that Pang Xiao would stand up for her. According to Pang Xiao's words, wouldn't Jinhua Park and the other courtyards of the mansion be fighting for themselves? If this spread out, it would seem that they were separated. It wasn't easy for the Yarrow clan to raise Pang Xiao. Their son just got married and yet he was helping his daughter-in-law to fight for power. Wouldn't the Yarrow clan be angrier and hate her more? However, Pang Xiao had good intentions. He just couldn't bear to see her being bullied. Qin Yining pursed her lips and looked at Madame Ma and Yarrow Chungu for help. She could see that Ma She was an emotional person. She handled matters quickly and straightforwardly. Yarrow Chungu and Yarrow She were the same type of people. They were both shrewd types. The only difference was that Yarrow Chungu was older and had seen through the world. He was also a man, so he was more rational, open-minded. After all, the Yarrow clan was a woman. She used to be a maidservant in the Pang family. Although Qin Yining didn't want to doubt the Yarrow clan's character, the younger generation didn't know how the Yarrow clan had a Pang Xiao with Pang Zhongzheng and how they were driven away by Madame Pang. But at least it showed that the Yarrow clan's success in gaining power and protecting their son was definitely not just based on a beautiful face. This kind of Yarrow clan knew too much about the scheming among the rich and powerful families. They were also used to fighting for power. It could be said that they knew more examples of insidious methods than Yarrow Chungu. Her daughter-in-law stole her son and came to fight for power. She was afraid that she wouldn't have a place to settle down in the future. Naturally, she wanted to hold on to power. Qin Yining's anxious face was pale. Madame Ma felt a burst of pain in her heart. She always felt that her daughter cared too much about some things. Now that she was making things difficult for her new daughter-in-law and had her own son resist, she must feel bad in her heart, right? But Qin Yining, who was sandwiched in the middle, felt even worse. "All right. Let's do as Daifu says." Yarrow Chungu put down his tobacco pipe and said, "Let Yi get used to it first. Let her get used to it. When she gets better, she can slowly take over." Yarrow Chungu's words of getting used to it obviously had a hidden meaning. Pang Xiao understood and nodded, "I think so too. It will take some time to get used to it. In this way, it's not a bad thing to let Sister Yi learn from it. Then it's settled. Zhao Kuan's family will send the matching cards to Jinhua Park later. This grandson will take his leave." Pang Xiao bowed to Yarrow Chungu and Madame Ma again. Then, he took Qin Yining's hand and strode out. As soon as he went out, Yarrow clan's tense body relaxed. His shoulders drooped and he sobbed, "This is what it means to forget your mother after marrying a wife. Sister Yi is good. But he can't. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.